You're standing on a beach in Hawaii. Warm breeze on your face, toes in the sand, a volcano smoldering in the distance. But this fairy tale won't last long as the whole island is sinking into the ocean, 40 times faster than the scientists previously expected. Some parts of the island could be underwater by 2050. Uh-oh. To understand why it's all happening, we have to go way back in time, millions of years ago, to see where it all started, deep under the Pacific Ocean. Now, unlike most volcanoes, which usually form along the edges of tectonic plates, the Hawaiian Islands popped into existence smack in the middle of one. That's because of something geologists call a hotspot. The Earth's mantle is like a giant pot of thick, bubbling stew. In a few places, heat builds up so intensely that molten rock, magma, punches straight through the Earth's crust. It's like turning up the heat under one part of a stew pot until it boils over. That upwelling of magma is the hotspot. As magma reaches the surface, it erupts as lava. When the lava cools and hardens, it forms land. When enough of it piles up over the thousands or even millions of years, an island forms. The hotspot doesn't move and stays rooted deep in the mantle. But the Pacific Plate, the giant chunk of Earth's crust that Hawaii rides on, is always slowly drifting to the northwest. So, every few million years, a new volcano forms over the hotspot and the old one gets carried away. Thanks to all this, a chain of islands formed, each one a little older and more worn down than the last. If you look at a map, you can trace this volcanic breadcrumb trail across the Pacific. It stretches all the way from the Big Island in the southeast, which is the youngest, up through Maui, Oahu, and Kauai, and into the sea as a chain of underwater mountains called the Emperor Seamounts. The Big Island is still growing today, thanks to active volcanoes like Kilauea and Mauna Loa. The older islands, like Kauai, are eroding, shrinking, and, sadly, sinking. Oahu is going in the water at the speed of nearly 1/40th of an inch every year. That's about as thick as 10 sheets of printer paper. But certain coastal regions are sinking at 1 inch per year, and that's no joke. This is happening for a few reasons. First, as the islands move away from the hotspot, they cool down. That might sound good in summer, but cooler rock actually shrinks and becomes denser, making the whole island sit lower in the water. Erosion gradually makes the island smaller, and unless there is further volcanic activity or a drop in sea level, the island submerges below the ocean surface at some point. Second, there's the weight of the islands themselves. They're made of solid rock and lava, thousands of cubic miles of it. Over time, their own mass slowly pushes them downward into the soft underlying mantle. And third, there's human activity. The first people who settled here were Polynesian navigators around 1,000 to 1,200 years ago. These navigators used stars, waves, and bird flight patterns to guide them and reach the Hawaiian Islands after weeks at sea. By the time European explorers arrived in the late 18th century, Hawaiians had developed a rich society with chiefs, priests, artisans, farmers, and navigators. The islands were divided into districts, each managed by local leaders, and people lived in harmony with the land. And then it was time of Kamehameha the Great. He unified all the Hawaiian Islands under a single rule for the first time in 1810. The islands were developing in the following centuries, and people needed more flat land near the coast. They started piling in dirt, rocks, and rubble to cover up soggy ground and create new land where there wasn't any before. It worked for a while, and that's how they built roads, neighborhoods, and even airports at some point. But that ground is soft and squishy underneath, and now those areas are sinking much faster than the rest of the island. A new study says that in some parts of Hawaii, this combination of factors could boost the risk of flooding by over 50% by the year 2050. It could force communities to prepare for future floods 50 years sooner than they originally thought. By 2080, flooding is expected to hit Waikiki, downtown Honolulu, and even the local international airport much more often. That could cause some serious problems for everyday life. Hawaii's tourism, beachfront buildings, and natural ecosystems could all be in complete chaos. Over $12.9 billion worth of infrastructure on Oahu alone is in danger from flooding and related damage. That's roads, hotels, homes, and way more. The scientists behind the study are hoping their work can actually help. They want local leaders to use this new data to make smart decisions that reduce future damage and keep people safe. It could help them figure out how bad flooding might get, how strong the buildings and roads need to be, and how to design communities that can survive big changes. Now, Hawaii isn't the only place in the world that's sinking because of its own weight. The weight of all the buildings in New York City is literally pressing it down into the earth. That's more than 1.68 trillion pounds of skyscrapers, apartments, towers, and bridges. That's enough pressure to make the land beneath the city sink by up to 0.08 of an inch per year. Now that may not sound like much, but it adds up quickly, and in some spots, the sinking is happening even faster. Scientists call this slow downward shift subsidence. To figure all this out, researchers use satellite data to look at just how heavy the city is and how fast the ground is moving. Turns out, it's not just the buildings sitting on solid rock. Some parts of the city were built on squishy stuff like old wetlands, soft sediments, or human-made fill, the same as in Hawaii. But even areas built on sturdier ground aren't safe. The study found that layers rich with clay deep underground can keep compressing slowly over time under the weight of heavy buildings. This process is called secondary settlement and can keep happening for decades or even centuries. So even if it looks like everything's fine on the surface, the ground could still be giving way underneath. The scientists behind the research say this isn't just a New York problem. Cities around the world are expanding fast, and most of that growth is happening along coastlines. Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, is one of the fastest sinking cities in the world, and it has around 10.5 million people living there and about 30 million in the greater metro area. Experts say that by 2030, some parts of the city could be flooded so often or so badly that all these people just won't be able to live there anymore. Jakarta was built on swampy land. It's right next to the Java Sea and has 13 rivers running through it, so flooding has always been a part of life there, but it's gotten worse lately. Scientists say that by 2050, about 95% of North Jakarta could be underwater, and it's already happening. In the last 10 years, North Jakarta sank by over 8 feet, and in some places, it's still sinking up to 10 inches every year. That's more than double what other big coastal cities are experiencing. On average, Jakarta sinks between 1/3 of an inch to 6 inches each year, and now nearly half of the city is already sitting below sea level. So Indonesia found an original solution to this problem and decided to build a brand new city in the jungle to replace Jakarta. They plan to grow Nusantara, the new capital, into a modern, green, and high-tech city in the next 20 years. City planners are calling Nusantara a sponge city, as it should be able to absorb rainwater into the ground like a sponge, instead of letting it flood the streets. That way, even with heavy rain, Nusantara won't flood the way Jakarta has.
You're chillin' in Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. A friend calls you up. Hey, I'm here too. Meet me in Maui. Great, but how do you get there? Your first thought is probably to take a ferry, but that's impossible. Hawaii is a pretty unique place. It's the most expensive state to live in. It has its own official language besides English. And it's the only American state made up entirely of islands. Hawaii has a total of 137 islands. 8 are the main ones, but only 6 are open to tourists. And the distance between those islands is probably bigger than you'd expect. For example, traveling from Oahu to the Big Island is around 185 miles, which is about the same distance as Chicago to Indianapolis. You might be surprised that you can't make that trip by boat. In fact, the only ferry system that actually takes passengers in Hawaii runs between Maui and Lanai. That's it. So your only option is to travel between islands is by plane. Honestly, it's a little surprising, especially considering how many people visit Hawaii every year. Tourism pretty much drives their economy, and in the first 8 months of 2024 alone, over 6 million people visited its beautiful beaches. Knowing that, we would expect Hawaii to set up a good ferry system to make it easier for visitors to get around. Just like in Greece. This would probably boost tourism even more, bringing more money to the state. But believe me, authorities and private companies also know that. In fact, they've already tried it. Ferries were a big way of getting around in Hawaii from the 19th century up until the 1950s. Since then, there have been a few attempts to bring back a ferry service, but unfortunately, they have all failed. One of the biggest attempts was the Hawaii Super Ferry, which aimed to provide a fast, affordable boat service between islands. It could carry almost 900 passengers and even allow them to bring their own cars along. The trial run started in 2007, and people were excited, but it turned into a big fiasco. A bunch of legal and environmental issues came up, like concerns about the impact on marine life, especially whales. The courts decided the ferry didn't go through the proper environmental reviews, and that caused a lot of trouble. By 2009, after tons of protests and setbacks, they had to shut it down. If a project like this comes up again, it will probably fail one more time. And there are a few reasons why it's almost impossible to set up a regular ferry system there. Let's start by talking about Hawaii's rough waters. They are deep and wild. Take the Alenoiaha Channel, for example. It's a 30-mile stretch that separates Maui from the Big Island. Its name means Great Billow Smashing Channel, and it lives up to that. It's over 6,000 feet deep, making it one of the most dangerous stretches of water on Earth. The wind there is also super strong, the fastest in Hawaii's coastal waters. But it's not any easier in the rest of the archipelago. The whole region gets hit by storms from the Pacific up north, sending big waves crashing into the islands and making the waters rough and unpredictable. Swells can come from 3, 4, or even more directions, making the sea feel really choppy. Someone who's not used to taking ferry boats would definitely find that, well, uncomfortable, to say the least. To deal with rough seas like this, the ferries have to be really big and strong. But that also makes them more expensive and harder to run than the ones in places like Alaska or Washington State. Another reason it's so tough to set up this system today has to do with marine life. A big ship moving through the shallower waters when docking could really damage the local ecosystem. And there's also the problem that the sea routes are also the migration paths of many sea animals, like humpback whales and spinner dolphins. Not to mention, ferry services can make it easier to spread harmful plants and animals, what experts call invasive species. See, Hawaii's ecosystem is super unique because it's been isolated out in the middle of the Pacific. When we talk about plants and animals that are native to Hawaii, we mean they got there on their own, no humans involved. They arrived with the help of waves, wind, or even birds flying over. But events like these are super rare. So for over 70 million years, their plants and animals didn't have to deal with outside competition. That's made them really fragile. So, when new species get brought in by us, it can be a big problem, and they could end up harming the environment. Hawaii's already been battling invasive species like fire ants, coqui frogs, and Meiconia, a fast-growing plant from South America that takes over native forests. People there worry that ferries, which carry cars and cargo between islands, could accidentally spread these invaders even more. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the video, the long distances between their lands don't really help either. For example, if you were to travel from Oahu to the Big Island of Hawaii by boat, it would take around 30 hours, and that's without any stops. The same trip by plane takes about 50 minutes. Ferries that cover long distances are much more expensive, so they need a much bigger demand to make them profitable. On top of that, the state doesn't really have the infrastructure, like enough ports and terminals to support the operations. So setting up new routes is pretty much out of the question. Airplanes, on the other hand, are a different story. The air travel industry in Hawaii is already well established and super competitive. That means flying is still the most practical option in Hawaii. Planes are quick, they don't make you seasick, and are pretty affordable, usually costing around $100 for a round trip. Okay, but what do the locals think about all this? Well, apparently, there isn't a huge demand for residents to commute between the islands all that often. Oahu is the busiest island in Hawaii, with about 70% of the state's population living there. It is where Honolulu, the capital, is located, and where most of the state's business happens. So, people from the other islands usually come over for a specific doctor's appointment or to catch a big concert. And that might happen once or twice a year, no more than that. So, even if people could choose between taking a ferry and a plane for these special occasions, most of them would probably still prefer flying. There are plenty of options between the main island airports. Planes usually start flying around 5 in the morning, and there are flights available every hour until the last one, which is usually at 9 in the evening. If you've been dreaming of going to this paradisiacal place but are worried about spending too much on plane tickets, I have some tips for you. First off, keep in mind that visiting all the main islands in 5 days or less is way too ambitious. So, if you don't have much time to spend there, think about your priorities. Each of the 6 islands open to tourists has its own vibe and activities. But you don't need to visit them all in one trip, and you can save some money by sticking to fewer islands. You can still explore the diversity of the islands by picking 2 that offer a nice contrast to each other. For example, while Oahu has that bustling city energy, Kauai has a much more relaxed vibe. Also, flights in the morning are usually cheaper, and it might be better to fly on a weekday rather than the weekend, although the price difference isn't usually huge. Hopefully these tips will save you some cash while still having an unforgettable island hopping adventure in Hawaii. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who's also dreaming of exploring these amazing islands.
Did you know there's a guy who rode on a wave for 7.5 miles? It was accomplished by Brazilian surfer Picaruta Salazar in 2004. Just for comparison, Central Park in New York extends for a mere 2.5 miles. That was the Pororoca wave, and it can only be surfed for 3 days a year. It's pretty powerful, so it sort of pushes you. But there are definitely some tough spots where it's not that easy to catch waves. If you're looking for the gnarliest surf spot, Pipeline in Hawaii is where it's at. But beware, it's not for the faint of heart. This place is known for its massive waves that can reach up to 20 feet tall. And did we mention the shallow reef? Yeah, wipeouts here can result in some serious injuries, or worse, you might end up sleeping with a fish. The waves at Pipeline are also super unpredictable, so you never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates, except instead of chocolate, it's huge waves that could crush you like a bug. But hey, if you're feeling brave, the annual Billabong Pipe Masters competition is held there every winter. Just make sure to bring your A game and a change of underwear. Even the most experienced surfers approach Pipeline with caution and respect. It's like trying to tame a wild animal. One wrong move and you're toast, or dinner. So, if you're ready to ride the gnarliest waves in the world, come on down to Pipeline. Just don't say we didn't warn you. For those who are dreaming California, there's a tough spot in the Golden State for you. Mavericks is notorious for its massive swells and strong currents, making it a challenge even for experienced surfers. Hold on tight, because this wave is gonna take you for a ride. First off, let's get one thing straight. Mavericks ain't for the weak. This bad boy can reach heights of up to 60 feet. But hey, if you're a seasoned surfer and you're feeling brave, then Mavericks is the place to be. Located just off the coast of Half Moon Bay, this spot is known for its massive swells and killer waves. It's like the Hulk of surf spots, big, bold, and ready to smash. Now, don't go thinking that Mavericks is all about the waves. Oh no, my friend. This spot is also home to some of the coolest surfers around. These dudes and dudettes live for the rush of catching a maverick wave, and they'll do whatever it takes to get out there. But here's the thing, Mavericks isn't just about surfing. It's also about community. These surfers have each other's backs, and they know that when they're out there on those massive waves, they're all in it together. It's like a big, salty family. So there you have it, folks, Mavericks, the wildest, most insane surf spot in California. If you're up for the challenge, grab your board and head on out. Just remember, when you're staring down a 60-foot wall of water, it's okay to scream like a little girl. We won't judge. Chupo in Tahiti also has some of the heaviest waves in the world, breaking over a shallow reef and creating intense barrel rides. First of all, the name itself is a mouthful. It's pronounced Chupo, and it means broken skulls in Tahitian. Yeah, you heard that right, broken skulls. The waves at Chupo are massive and can reach up to 23 feet high and break over a shallow reef, which creates a super powerful wave that can barrel for hundreds of yards. And if you wipe out, well, let's just say you'll be getting up close and personal with that reef. It's like a cheese grater for your skin. So make sure you bring some Band-Aids and a good insurance policy. But hey, if you're up for the challenge, Chupo is one of the most epic surf spots in the world. However, I hope you're going to choose a much safer spot. If you're looking for some cool waves but don't want to risk your life, then you gotta check out these safe surfing spots around the world. First up, we got Waikiki Beach in Hawaii. This spot is perfect for beginners and pros alike, with consistent waves and a sandy bottom. Plus, there are lifeguards on duty to keep an eye out for any trouble. Next, there's Bondi Beach in Australia. This iconic beach is known for its beautiful scenery and chill vibes, but it also has some great waves for surfing. The water is shallow, and there are plenty of surf schools around to teach you the ropes, or in this case, the boards. But if you're looking for something a little more exotic, head over to Nocera in Costa Rica. This spot has warm water, consistent waves, and a laid-back atmosphere. Plus, the locals are super friendly and will welcome you with open arms. Last but not least, there's Muizenberg Beach in South Africa. This spot has some of the most consistent waves in the world, but they're not too big or dangerous. Plus, there are shark spotters on duty to keep you safe from any unwanted attention from local carnivores. But no matter how safe the spot is, you're still going to need some cool life hacks to bring your surfing to a brand new level. Have you ever wondered why surfers use wax on their boards? Well, let me tell you, it's not just for show. See, when you're out there shredding the gnar, you don't want to slip and slide all over the place like a penguin on ice. That's where the wax comes in. Basically, the wax creates a grip on the board so you can stick to it like peanut butter on bread. Without it, but here's the thing, not all wax is created equal. You gotta find the right kind for your board and the water conditions. It's like choosing the right flavor of ice cream for your cone. You don't want to end up with mint chocolate chip when you really wanted Rocky Road. So, next time you see a surfer waxing up their board, just remember they're not doing it for the smell, although some waxes do smell pretty sweet. They're doing it so they don't wipe out and embarrass themselves in front of all the folks on the beach. And that's worth its weight in gold. And by the way, did you know that rubbing a little bit of wax on the bottom of your feet can give you a better grip on your board? Yeah, it's like magic. No more slipping and sliding around like a seal on a wet rock. Another common hack is to wear earplugs. You see, there's even a condition called surfer's ear. Surfers are constantly exposed to cold wind and water, and some of them even surf in cold temperatures. If your ears are constantly exposed to cold, your ear canal may shrivel up. As a consequence, water, wax, you, and even air all get trapped in your ear, which may lead to certain infections. So, to prevent water and cold air from getting trapped in their ears, pro surfers like to use earplugs. But even if you're just a newbie, you gotta use their tip. Oh, and here's another classic. If you're surfing in cold water and don't have a wetsuit hood, just rub some petroleum jelly on your ears to keep them warm. Hey, why do you think some surfers have clear nail polish on their emergency kits? It's not for their nails, but for their boards. So if you're dealing with a stubborn ding in your board, grab some clear nail polish and fill in the crack. It'll keep water from seeping in and causing more damage. However, pros will say that nail polish is a terrible idea, and there are a lot of repair kits out there. Yeah, this one's up to you. So, there you have it, my fellow wave riders. Now go out there and shred those gnarly waves like the pro you are.
People living in Hawaii need to make at least twice the average salary in the rest of the US to live comfortably. Those who aren't ready to pay $5 for a gallon of milk have to look for happiness elsewhere. And year after year, the state makes it to the top lines of the population loss rating. While the local middle class is leaving, Hawaii is turning into a heaven for billionaires. Just 37 of them already own 11% of all the private land in the Aloha state. Larry Ellison, co-founder of the Oracle Corporation, bought 98% of the island of Lanai, including the grocery store, the only gas station, and the community newspaper, all for a nifty sum of $300 million. This makes him the boss and landlord of everyone on the island. Mark Zuckerberg, the Meta founder and CEO, is building a huge compound on Kauai with more than a dozen buildings, at least 30 bedrooms and bathrooms, a tunnel leading to a 5,000 square feet underground bunker, and 11 tree houses connected by intricate rope bridges. The local residents with ancestral rights to this land lost in court and had to put it up for auction. The Malaysian tycoon Kvek Leng Khan owns a third of the island of Molokai through his business empire. Of course, these and some of the world's richest people create new jobs and invest in development projects on the islands. But still, nearly 2/3 of the locals believe that their state is being run for tourists at the expense of the residents. A lot of famous people like to live in Wailea and Makina in Maui because it's peaceful and gives them the privacy they want. Oprah Winfrey has a big house up in the local hills. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, reportedly bought a huge house by La Perouse Bay for $78 million. Other famous people who live in Maui include Clint Eastwood, Mick Fleetwood, Jim Carrey, and Alice Cooper. When you visit Maui, you can see a special Hall of Fame display at the airport showing those celebrities. It's supposed to celebrate their ties with the island, but the local people feel like it only highlights the huge gap between the new super wealthy residents and the local people who can barely afford to live there. As the rich and famous keep buying property across Hawaii, home prices continue to rise. It's more expensive to buy a house here than in Washington, D.C. or California. Part of the reason for such high pricing is how the land itself is formed. Hawaii is bigger than most people think, but it's made up of lots of separate islands that are spread far apart. Even though the islands are big, not all of the land can be used to build houses or neighborhoods. Unlike most of the US, which has a lot of flat land and gentle hills, much of Hawaii is made up of steep, rocky mountains and rough terrain. This kind of land is very hard to build on or live on. Because of this, most of the people on Hawaii, about 1 million of them, live on the island called Oahu. The other islands, like the Big Island, have far fewer people. There isn't enough land for everyone, and that makes it hard for people who have lived in Hawaii their whole lives to afford a place to live. Tourism makes up 21% of the state's economy. Most of the visitors come from the United States and Japan. Tourists bring in tons of money, but there's a problem. Depending too much on tourism can be risky for Hawaii. In the recent years, because of we all know what happened, a health rule called the Conditional Sail Order stopped cruise ships from coming to Hawaii for health safety reasons. Many other tourist activities, like visiting beaches or attending events, were also shut down. With fewer visitors, Hawaii earned a lot less money, which hurt the economy. To avoid this problem in the future, Hawaii has been trying to make money in other ways besides tourism. One idea is to invest more in fishing, but this hasn't been easy. At some point, there was too much fishing going on here, and now Hawaii has to bring in 63% of its seafood from other places instead of catching it nearby. There are farms here that grow pineapples, macadamia nuts, coffee, and produce milk. But now, farming isn't as important as it was 100 years ago. Probably one of the reasons is that it's more profitable to sell the land for houses or hotels than to use it for farming. This change made Hawaii even more dependent on tourism and made living in the Aloha State so very pricey. Honolulu is reported to be the 7th most expensive city to live in the US. A family of 4 spends around $8,000 a month here, and a single adult will have to pay, on average, $2,500. Food alone costs around $500 a person for 1 month. Most of the food in Hawaii, about 85 to 90%, comes from faraway places. Since it has to travel more than 2,500 miles to get there, around 1/3 of all the food spoils along the way, especially because Hawaii is warm and humid. This waste makes things more expensive because stores know they'll lose some of their products and charge more to cover their losses. There aren't as many stores competing with each other. If stores don't compete, they have no reason to lower their prices. On top of that, they have to pay a lot for things like rent and electricity, so they raise their prices to make up for those costs. Speaking of electricity, an average bill is around $200, which is almost 90% higher than the national average. Yep, the Aloha State has the highest energy costs in the country. And perhaps that's why people in Hawaii use the least amount of electricity compared to other states. But their bills are still much higher. The main reason is the price per unit of electricity, called a kilowatt hour. 1 unit of electricity costs almost 40 cents. To compare, Utah has the cheapest rate at just 10.91 cents. It's so expensive in Hawaii because most of the electricity comes from oil, and that oil has to be shipped to the islands. Since Hawaii depends so much on oil, energy costs go up and down with oil prices. On top of all that, the income tax is some of the highest in the country. A quarter of all households in Hawaii spent more than their income in 2024. To survive, people used savings and credit cards and cut expenses. They also had to work more hours or get an extra job. They were forced to sell their belongings and borrow money from relatives, banks, or other lenders. Almost half of residents are in the category called ALICE, and it has nothing to do with Alice in Wonderland. It means asset limited, income constrained, employed. More than 1 in 3 residents lives below the ALICE annual income threshold. And then there's also legislation that further complicates things for Hawaii. It says that any goods shipped between places in the US must be carried on ships that are owned, built, and run by Americans. This makes shipping much more expensive because US ships and crews cost a lot more than ships from other countries. Most of the world's ships don't follow these rules because they're registered in countries like Panama. Because of this, Hawaii can still get goods from places like East Asia using cheaper ships, but if they want something from the mainland US, it costs way more money. In fact, this law costs Hawaii over $1 billion every year. This law also makes it really hard for Hawaii to grow businesses because everything is so expensive. The cost of insurance is also going up. This is because the islands are hit by natural disasters like hurricanes and storms more often now. All of this adds up to making life in Hawaii even more expensive. But even despite all that, the state steadily lands high in studies on well-being. Even people who can barely afford a living are mostly happier, or at least less unhappy in Hawaii than in other states. I guess the strong community support, a clean and fantastically beautiful environment, and the ability to have beach parties all year round make up for many hardships.
So, since 2000, the world has been hit with more than 1,700 earthquakes with magnitude greater than 5. Many happened around the Ring of Fire, located around the Pacific Ocean. In North America, the biggest threat is the San Andreas Fault Line, which can create an earthquake of a magnitude higher than any other, earning it the spine-tingling nickname, the Big One. The potential destruction of California is a terrifying prospect that could have unimaginable consequences. But the Big One is just the beginning of what's to come. Bad news! Scientists have predicted an earth-shattering event that will occur in 2030. Like it or not, there's a 70% chance that we'll experience the Big One, and it will be an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7. The San Andreas Fault Line will cause the Big One, but what is scary is that we can't predict it. On the other hand, a massive earthquake occurs every 100 years. This means there's always time to prepare for a natural disaster. If we traveled back in time, we'd see a few significant earthquakes like the ones that wiped out San Francisco and Fort Tajon. Buildings made a long time ago are not quake-proof. They will collapse. Even if they survive, you should not enter them. But buildings are not the most dangerous part. You should watch out for electrical lines and gas pipes. Your hill house might be lovely, but it is extremely unsafe. During quakes, the hill can turn into a massive landslide that will destroy everything in its path. Say goodbye to road trips because all the roads will be ruined. You should have some spare water and food since you won't be able to go to the supermarket. This disaster won't be cheap. It will cost the U.S. around $200 billion to recover from the quake. At least the earthquake will not trigger tsunamis. But there's something that can cause more damage than the Big One. The notorious Cascadia subduction zones start in California and ends up all the way in Vancouver, Canada. The San Andreas Fault Line is nothing compared to this zone. It can wipe the whole coast off the face of the Earth, an example of hyperbole. Subduction zones are tectonic plates forced to be one under the other and constantly pulling apart. One is called the North American Plate and the other is the Juan de Fuca Plate. Zones like these are not to be messed with, since they are terrifying hotspots for earthquake activity and extremely dangerous because they cause massive underwater quakes. But they are underwater, so what can they do to us? Well, they can cause giant tsunamis, flooding cities, and destroying the coastline. Right now, the most active zone is the Ring of Fire. The Cascadia zone might be less active, but it is like a sleeping beast that can wake up and destroy everything in its path, causing a groundbreaking earthquake. The last time all this stress was released was in the year 1700. Unlike the San Andreas quake, this one will cause massive tsunamis and much bigger shocks. Let's hope you'll be camping in an open field at that time, because most buildings and bridges will likely be destroyed. Also, be ready for the aftershocks, as they'll be devastating. Nature won't be spared either. Landslides will change animals' habitats. Even our homes will be changed forever. Luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and scientists are doing everything they can to ensure our safety. New rules are implemented. Every new building must be able to withstand massive shocks. They're developing modern warning systems, and every new infrastructure must follow strict quake-proof guidelines. The Juan de Fuca and the North American plates are locked together, but they won't stay like that forever. When they unlock, get ready for a massive shake. The closer you are to the epicenter, the more damage you'll experience. But even if you are lucky to be far away, you may still feel the ground shaking for some time. Now, if we compare the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas Fault, we'll see how much more dangerous the Cascadia zone is. In 1994, there was an enormous 6.7 magnitude earthquake in the Northridge area, close to the San Andreas Fault. Sadly, many people didn't make it, and some were injured. Back then, buildings were not strong and earthquake-proof, and many of them were damaged. The Cascadia subduction zone can potentially cause a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 6 quake has the power of around 44 million pounds of dynamite, but a magnitude 9 has the power of 44 trillion pounds of dynamite. The strongest ever recorded quake was in Chile. Its magnitude measured 9.5, and it destroyed most everything. So let's say you've survived the quake, but the struggle is far from over. Soon after, a massive tsunami will strike, with waves that might reach up to 100 feet in some areas. That's so unlike the San Andreas earthquake which can't produce any significant waves. So say goodbye to your beautiful garden, since salt water will destroy trees and plants, changing the environment for a period of time. The only positive thing will be you won't need Halloween decorations, because all those dried out trees will resemble a ghost forest. The combination of waves, quakes, and the sheer size of the area will make this natural disaster much more dangerous than any caused by the San Andreas Fault or the so-called Big One. A quake similar to this happened around 300 years ago. Many more have been recorded in the past 3,500 years, proving that they continually occur every 400 to 600 years. So, technically, we have around 100 to 300 years before the next big one hits. We still have no idea how exactly the Cascadia subduction zone works, because we discovered it in 1970. This zone is super scary because it can cause big earthquakes. It was found by accident when researchers studied the Ring of Fire. They wanted to know if this area had caused any trouble in the past years, and the proof was under their noses. In Washington, there is a horror forest where nothing has been growing for years. When researchers tested the soil, they found a tremendous amount of salt. They put two and two together and concluded that a massive tsunami had been the reason. Experts still didn't know when the forest was destroyed. But Japan kept records of a gigantic earthquake that had a similar effect. It was the one that happened in the year 1700. There is a 1 in 3 chance that the next one will occur in 2050. You must know how to survive the Canadian earthquakes and make it out unscathed, so listen carefully. Those who live in this area have almost no experience with earthquakes like this one. Surviving the quake is relatively easy, but the tsunami coming afterwards is the real danger. After the shake, find the highest ground and go there. Only bring the essentials, like food and water. Yeah, leave your baseball card collection at home. After the first hit, don't try to go down. Seismologists say that most likely there will be a few more waves, and they have proven this. On the 22nd of May, 1960, seismologist Jerry Eston and his 4 friends went to Hawaii to see an expected tsunami that was to happen around midnight. They set up their gear on Wailuku Bridge with an escape route planned. This bridge had been destroyed in the previous tsunami, but the new one was much taller and better. After midnight, the water was 4 feet above the average level. The second wave hit a half hour after midnight, and the water rose another 9 feet by 1 a.m. The water started going down and dropped by 7 feet, but the horror was far from over. Next, they saw a wave that was around 20 feet tall. This shows us that tsunamis are unpredictable, and we should listen to experts to stay safe.
Some mistakes have the power to change the course of history. One such story has to do with an old, boring key that could have saved the Titanic from its infamous demise. The key belonged to the crow's nest locker that housed binoculars, which could have helped the lookouts spot the iceberg sooner. There's more. The key wasn't even on board the ship when it set sail. The second officer took it with him when he was taken off the ship at the last minute. As the story goes, the officer forgot to hand the key over to his replacement in his hurry to disembark. So, when the lookouts were in desperate need of binoculars, they were out of luck. One of the lookouts, named Fred Fleet, even testified that if they had had binoculars, they would have spotted the iceberg in time to avoid it. And when asked how much sooner, Fleet replied, "Enough to get out of the way." In 2015, some auctioneers got their hands on Blair's key and presented it as one of the most important artifacts from the Titanic. They truly believed it could have saved the ship. Blair kept the key as a souvenir and passed it down to his daughter, Nancy. At one point, it was up for auction with a price tag of over $80,000. Blair himself was quite the hero, it seems. A year after the Titanic disaster, he was awarded a gallantry medal for saving a crewman who had fallen overboard while he had been on board the liner Majestic. He may have forgotten a key, but he sure didn't forget to be a hero when it counted. This next story is both funny and tragic. It's about NASA's lost $125 million Mars Climate Orbiter. The spacecraft engineers failed to convert from English to metric measurements before the craft was launched, and as a result, they lost it. The navigation team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory used the metric system of millimeters and meters, while Lockheed Martin Astronautics in Denver used the English system of inches, feet, and pounds. JPL engineers mistook acceleration readings measured in English units of pound-seconds for a metric measure of force called Newton-seconds. What's worse is that none of JPL's quality control procedures caught the error in the 9 months it took the spacecraft to make its 461 million-mile flight to Mars. That's a long time to be lost in translation, don't you think? The miscalculations were enough to throw the spacecraft so far off track that it flew too deeply into the Martian atmosphere and was destroyed when it entered its initial orbit around Mars. It's embarrassing to lose a spacecraft to such a simple math error. And it's hard to think of another example of such a large loss due to English versus metric confusion. Ever heard about the mathematical mistake that led to the discovery of the New World? Spoiler alert, it involves a guy named Christopher Columbus and a really big globe. Back in 1492, Columbus set sail from Spain with a mission to find a new trade route to Asia. He was convinced that he was less than 3,000 miles away from Japan, and just a bit more sailing would get him to the Indies with all their tasty spices. The only problem was that Columbus was a bit off in his calculations, like way off. He made a mistake in estimating the size of the globe, which led him to believe that Earth was far smaller than it actually is. Now I know what you're thinking. Wasn't Columbus afraid that he would fall off the edge of the world? Contrary to popular myth, Columbus and his crew knew the Earth was a globe, just like the ancient Greeks did 2 millennia earlier. They weren't worried about falling off the edge, but rather about the size of the ocean they planned on crossing. And to make matters worse, Columbus had no idea that an unknown landmass existed between Spain and Asia. After weeks at sea, Columbus finally reached the Caribbean. He believed that he had landed on the outskirts of Asia, and so named the islands the West Indies. He went on to explore the Caribbean and the northern coast of South America. But here's where things get really interesting. Even though Columbus insisted until his last day that he had reached Asia, another Italian explorer named Amerigo Vespucci mapped the eastern shore of South America down to Brazil and proved conclusively that Columbus had actually discovered a whole new world. A German mapmaker saw Amerigo's maps and labeled the new landmass America after him. And since his maps were super popular at the time, the name stuck. One man named Alexander Fleming stumbled upon one of the most significant medical discoveries of all time by accident. At one point in his career, Fleming observed the demise of many people from uncontrollable infections. Antiseptics were used to fight this, but they often did more harm than good. In 1922, while he had a cold himself, Fleming transferred some of his, nasal discharge to a petri dish and left it on his cluttered desk. When he finally examined it weeks later, he found that an enzyme had some antimicrobial properties. It wasn't until 1928, when Fleming left an uncovered petri dish next to an open window, that he stumbled upon the discovery that would change the world. The dish became contaminated with fungus spores. And when he examined them under the microscope, Fleming discovered that the bacteria near the fungus were dying. He managed to isolate the fungus and found that it was effective against numerous things that caused diseases. And thus, penicillin was discovered. As Fleming himself put it, "I did not discover penicillin. Nature did that. I only discovered it by accident." Talk about a lucky break. In the early 1520s, the east coast of the United States of America was a big mystery waiting to be solved. The Spanish found Florida, and the English and Portuguese found Newfoundland, but the area in between was like a blank spot on the map. France decided to take action and sent an expedition to explore the area. They chose a guy called Giovanni da Verrazzano to lead the trip. For this expedition, he got 4 ships. Unfortunately, 2 of them were shipwrecked, and a third one went home after doing some other business on the Spanish coast. Only the flagship, La Dauphine, crossed the Atlantic with Verrazzano and his 50-man crew. Verrazzano set sail from Madeira and landed at Cape Fear. From there, he sailed south, but got a little scared of running into the Spanish, so he returned somewhere north of Charleston. He anchored not far from his original landing spot, but unlike other explorers, he preferred to anchor well out at sea. He did send a boat to the shore, and he met the natives. They were described as wearing just some animal skins covering their bodies and garlands of bird feathers. As Verrazzano sailed along the coast, he reached the outer banks of North Carolina. He thought that the waters he discovered were those of the Pacific. In reality, what he'd stumbled upon was the Pamlico Sound. He thought that North America was just a long, extremely narrow strip of land. This mistake led mapmakers to show North America as almost completely divided in two. Moving on, Verrazzano reached a beautiful place that he called Arcadia, probably Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Sailing further north, he missed the entrances to Chesapeake and Delaware Bays because he kept quite far from the coast until New Jersey. Then, the moment we've all been waiting for, Verrazzano discovered New York Harbor, and he anchored in the Narrows. Later, it was named after him, and now it is spanned by the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge. Once Verrazzano's sea appeared on the map, it became widely accepted and impacted loads of future explorers. For example, Henry Hudson went looking for a passage to the Pacific in the middle latitudes of the continent. But, as it turns out, the Englishman never did find the Pacific Ocean anywhere near Virginia. And the cartographic myth eventually faded away. It's funny to think about how a mistaken belief could have such an impact on history.
This area might just be the most important spot in America right now, as it is worth over $1 trillion. There's something incredibly valuable hidden right here at Thacker Pass, and it is going to shake things up, not just in Nevada, but in the US economy and its global relations. The McDermott Caldera is a massive area, about 28 miles long by 22 miles wide, stretching across northern Nevada and southern Oregon. It's in Humboldt County, a quiet, rural place with just one main city that's going to change a lot in the next 5 to 10 years. That's because they found white gold there. We're talking about lithium. And to explain why this metal is so important, we need a scale. On one side, we place a chunk of lithium, and on the other, an apple. What do you think will happen? If both have the same volume, the scale is going to tip toward the apple. That's because lithium is super light. Its density is about 0.3 ounces per cubic inch, which makes it the lightest solid you can find at room temperature. Lithium is also extremely reactive. That means it combines with other elements very easily, and it can catch fire just as easily. Mix it with water, fire. Expose it to air, yep, fire again. But when you combine its lightness with its high reactivity, you get a material that's perfect for batteries, like the one powering your smartphone, laptop, or even your electric car. Nevada's been hiding this treasure for about 16 million years. The McDermott Caldera used to be a volcanic hotspot, spewing molten rock and creating a huge lake filled with mineral-rich waters. Over time, that lake dried up, leaving behind thick layers of clay loaded with lithium. Right now, Thacker Pass Mine is sitting on one of the biggest untapped lithium reserves in the world, worth about $1.5 trillion. If everything goes as planned, They expect it to produce about 40,000 tons of high-quality lithium a year. And that's enough to make batteries for up to 800,000 electric cars. Like I mentioned earlier, this metal is the backbone of modern batteries. And with the world racing toward green energy, the demand for lithium is skyrocketing. Since 2020, its price has gone up more than 10 times, making it the most expensive battery metal in the world. That means it's way more expensive than magnesium, nickel, cobalt, and other materials used in rechargeable batteries. Right now, we're using about 1.16 million tons of lithium per year, and roughly 85% of it goes into making batteries, mostly for cars. Between 2030 and 2040, experts think we will need to double the money we're putting into production, from $94 billion to $188 billion. At the same time, investment in batteries will jump by over 200%, reaching $686 billion. Finally, by 2050, the demand for lithium is expected to be more than 10 times higher than what we're producing now. Sorry, I know that's a lot of numbers, but I just want to show how important Thacker Pass will be for the whole world. This mine is going to be key to keeping everything running. I mean, literally, since most of the future demand will be for things like cars, electric bikes, scooters, and renewable energy storage. Nevada could also be the epicenter of a global energy revolution, with the US aiming to cut pollution by 50% by 2030. A big part of that is replacing gas-powered vehicles with electric ones. And to make that happen, America is going to need a whole lot more lithium than it's producing right now. Nowadays, most of the metal used in the United States come from countries like Chile and Argentina. So if America wants to be a leader in this market, it really needs to invest more and more in projects like Thacker Pass. But there's another challenge. Finding lithium in a mine is one thing, but refining it is another story. Just like diamonds are carefully cut and shaped to bring out their sparkle and sold in rings and necklaces, something similar needs to be done with lithium. The raw material that comes from the mines has to be refined into a pure form that can actually be used in things like batteries. And China pretty much dominates this part of the market, and they're responsible for about 75% of global lithium-ion battery production. In other words, it doesn't matter if a country finds this powerful metal on its land, it will probably still need China to help refine it. So, the US is eager to strengthen its supply chain. In fact, they're so excited about this possibility that authorities have invested over $2 billion in loans into the Nevada project. Because of that, Thacker Pass could make the US a leader in lithium production worldwide. If their estimates are right, the McDermott caldera could hold nearly half of the world's known lithium reserves. It would almost double the reserves found in Bolivia's salt flats, for example, which used to hold the record for the world's largest deposit. This discovery is about to change Humboldt County for good. Those quiet streets surrounded by nature will never feel the same again. The mine will need about 2,000 workers who will probably move there from other cities. Those workers will need houses, hospitals, schools for their kids, and all the necessary services. Do you see how it's like a ripple effect? For every person hired to work on the project during construction, 6 more people will get hired in the state to support them. Thacker Pass is also going to have a huge impact on the economy, not just in Nevada, but all across the country. People expect the mine to be active for 35 years, and each year it's expected to generate over $2 billion. But here's the thing. In Thacker Pass, they'll be extracting lithium from clay, and this process has never been done on such a huge scale before. So it's kind of a hit or miss. But if it works, it could completely change the industry. Big question. Who's interested in all this? Well, we've got 3 big companies eyeing the lithium market in the US. First, there's ExxonMobil. The oil giant wants to start producing lithium by 2027, and they have plans to become the top supplier for electric vehicles by 2030. Then there's General Motors, the company behind big car brands like Chevrolet and Cadillac. They're so interested in this business that they agreed to pay $625 million for a 38% stake in Thacker Pass. And finally, Tesla. In 2023, they started building a factory in Texas to process lithium. It's all part of their plan to handle more of their supply chain themselves. Now that you know how important lithium is, you might be wondering, what if we run out? Well, that could happen, since it comes from mining and, just like gold, is a finite resource. But that doesn't mean we'd have to give up smartphones or electric cars. If we ever run out of this metal, we'd probably find new ways to produce batteries. In fact, some experts think thermal batteries could be the next big thing. They store extra energy from renewable resources like wind or solar power, which are very cheap. So they represent a new way of storing energy at a small fraction of the cost. Nowadays, they're primarily used for powering the production of steel, cement, and chemicals. Thermal batteries are also being used to heat and cool large buildings. However, more and more projects are focusing on bringing this technology into private spaces, like houses and apartments. Experts are optimistic that initiatives like these could make thermal batteries as well known as electric batteries, and they might soon become a regular part of our daily lives.
The floor is lava. Haha, just kidding. But honestly, it's kind of falling apart. You might not feel it yet, but a huge part of North America has already lost 37 miles worth of rock from its foundation. And no, this isn't about earthquakes or giant sinkholes. It's about the continent losing pieces of the very thing that keeps the ground from wobbling around like a bad carnival ride. A team of researchers has just dropped a geological bombshell. Part of North America's ground is thinning out like a very sad, very slow ice cream drip. How do they know? They basically gave Earth a high-tech full-body MRI and created 3D maps showing how rocks once considered indestructible are now melting away into the planet's guts, like an upside-down cheese pizza inside an oven. But to really understand this mess, you first have to meet my old friends, cratons. Cratons are like the roots of the continents. They're thick, tough, and ancient. We're talking billions of years old. These bad boys survived meteor impacts, supervolcanoes, and even the tectonic movement of plates. If the plates got into fistfights, for example, you can bet we would see mountain ranges being born. If they got a divorce, drifting apart from each other, then a whole new ocean would be born. All of these things leave scars on the surface of Earth, but the cratons seem to always remain unfazed, like the cockroaches of geology. And since a craton can basically get punched in the face and feel nothing, scientists always assumed these things were nearly indestructible. But then, a group of researchers took their fancy machines to the test and realized that, wait, the cratons are falling apart? How? Enter the Farallon Plate, a really ancient tectonic plate that started to slide under North America's major plate over 100 million years ago. This is a pretty normal process, actually. It's called subduction, and it's how Earth recycles rocks and keeps itself from overheating. This subduction thing has been happening for so long that, by now, the Farallon is almost 400 miles away from the craton, sitting pretty chill at the lower mantle, weirdly close to the outer core of our planet. But the Farallon has been causing trouble, like that one roommate who moved out but keeps leaving weird stuff in the fridge. You see, as it sinks, it tugs on the bottom of North America's foundation, stretching it out and causing pieces to fall off into the deep mantle. And if that wasn't enough drama, the sinking Farallon has also leaked water and carbon dioxide into the surrounding rocks, making the craton even softer and easier to shred apart. Thanks, Farallon. Very cool of you. By studying hundreds of earthquakes across thousands of monitoring stations, scientists have confirmed the story. Big chunks of continental material are dripping downward, thinning the craton by as much as 37 miles. That's more missing rocks than can fit into a milk carton. Sounds dramatic, right? But don't worry. This is happening at a snail's pace. It'll take millions of years for anything noticeable to happen. Your great few grandkids from the distant future might still be standing on solid ground. But don't get too comfy. This thing may not be an urgent problem, but there's another type of sinking that's happening faster than you can say, "Help." Here's the thing. By 2050, at least 32 major cities in the US, including New York, Baltimore, and Charleston, could be partially underwater. And guess what? This one is mostly our fault. Scientists noticed that since 2007, some cities have been sinking into the ground between 0.04 and 0.08 inches every year. Charleston in South Carolina is pulling ahead in the worst way possible, sinking 0.15 inches annually. Sure, these numbers sound tiny and a bit ridiculous, but Charleston is barely 9 feet above sea level, and a little sinking goes a long way when the ocean is breathing down your neck. On really bad flood days, people there have to abandon their cars and basically swim home. This whole phenomenon is called land subsidence, and when you mix sinking land with rising sea levels, you get a disaster cocktail of flooded streets, salty farmland, ghost forests, and a lot of very cranky homeowners. And it doesn't stop with just homes. Infrastructure like bridges, roads, airports, and power plants, all things we rely on daily, are also at risk of serious damage. Flooded electrical grids and sunken highways could cause billions more in economic losses and create major safety hazards for communities. Now, let's be fair. Not everything is humanity's fault. Some of this trouble dates all the way back to the Ice Age. About 12,000 years ago, massive ice sheets covered the northern US. They were heavy, like seriously heavy. The weight pushed the land down, and when the ice melted, the ground didn't just pop back up like a trampoline. Instead, it started playing a weird game of geological seesaw. The places that were squished started rising, and the places that weren't got pulled down. This whole process, called glacial isostatic adjustment, try to say that 3 times fast. But of course, humans found a way to make it worse. Groundwater extraction is a major culprit. Think of it like pulling the stuff out of the mattress. After a while, the whole thing just sags. In places like California's Central Valley, the land is dropping by up to 8 inches a year because we keep pumping out water during droughts. In cities like New York, the problem isn't just water. Skyscrapers themselves are making it worse. Yep, turns out if you stack millions of tons of concrete and steel onto soft ground, it tends to flatten. And in case you're wondering, the total mass of New York City's buildings is around 1.68 trillion pounds. That's about the same as 3.5 million statues of liberty piled up. With so much weight concentrated over a relatively small area, the underlying soils have no choice but to compress over time. And if you thought it couldn't get messier, think again. We've been building dams, which stop rivers from delivering fresh sediment to coastal areas. That sediment is kind of like Mother Nature's way of fluffing the ground back up. Without it, coastal lands are compacting like an old sponge. Plus, when wetlands are drained for agriculture or construction, the peaty soil dries out and collapses. Honestly, it's like the ground just can't catch a break. Scientists also noticed that the areas that used to be lush wetlands are now among the fastest sinking spots in the country, especially along the Gulf Coast. Louisiana, for example, is losing about a football field of land because of this mix of subsidence and rising seas. So what's the end game here for us regular people who just want to live above sea level? Well, it's not looking great. Ghost forests, which are basically drowned woodlands, are popping up. Farmland is turning salty and unusable. And even sunny day flooding, where streets flood without any rain, is becoming a thing. Yikes! Meanwhile, over on the West Coast, California is not exactly winning either. San Francisco and Los Angeles are both sinking, which means that rising sea levels could hit them twice as hard and twice as fast. In some places like the Palos Verdes Peninsula, the ground has been sinking so fast, people over there might as well live like moles. So, is America turning into the next Atlantis? Probably not next week, but without serious action, like cutting back on groundwater pumping and planning smarter cities, at least 500,000 people are in serious danger. And the housing damage could easily rack up a jaw-dropping $109 billion by 2050. In the end, while North America isn't about to sink like a poorly made souffle, it's definitely showing some cracks in the crust. So maybe let's ease up on groundwater pumping, rethink how and where we build, and invest a little more in keeping our feet dry. After all, if the floor really does become lava someday, we're gonna wish we had at least fixed the leaks first.
So it turns out that you can't drive between South America and North America. And there's a simple reason for that. There are no roads connecting the two continents, not even a rudimentary one. Technically, you could try your luck crossing on foot, but let me tell you, that would be a huge, huge mistake. The region that connects the two continents is called the Darien Gap. It stretches across southern Panama's Darien province and the northern part of Colombia. The only land route there is a 60-mile jungle trek. Crossing it can take anywhere from 3 to 10 days. It depends on weather conditions, how much you're carrying, and honestly, just pure luck. Chance plays a big role here, because this isn't some chill, relaxing nature walk. It's a harsh, extreme environment, known for being completely isolated and one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Still, people seem to forget that and go there anyway. Every year, the number of people crossing just keeps growing. In 2014, fewer than 10,000 people crossed the gap. In 2023, that number increased to 520,000. Now, you might be wondering, what are so many people doing in the middle of the two American continents, risking all that danger? Well, that's because the Darien Gap has become a route for refugees migrating to North America. But to get there, they face all kinds of dangers, from insect bites and infections to serious fractures. We're talking about a no-man's land. Since there are no police stations, immigrants must also watch out for thieves. Along the way, they have no choice but to rely on and support each other. Most people start the crossing with at least a tent or tarp, rain boots, water, and some food. But these things get heavy fast, and people normally can't carry enough supplies for the entire journey. At some point, people start drinking river water to avoid dehydration. But the water's full of bacteria and dirt, so it causes intestinal issues. And if things get serious, there's no medical help there. To make this whole scenario even worse, the temperatures are brutal, often hitting over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, a small subset of people who venture through the Darien Gap are hardcore adventurers and travelers looking for a survival experience in the jungle. But this region is no place for a relaxing vacation. A group of tourists who went there in 2023 ended up getting jungle rot, a fungus that affects the feet. The situation got so bad that a woman had to be carried out by the group on the last day because she couldn't walk. No matter how prepared people are for the Darien Gap, in the end, survival mostly comes down to luck. Out there, travelers won't find cities with solid infrastructure, where they can crash at a hotel and gear up for the next day. In some spots, they might stumble across basic camps right in the jungle. These camps might offer wooden platforms for tents, bucket showers, toilets, and even plates of chicken and rice. But it all comes at a price. Wi-Fi, for example, might cost $2 an hour, and that seems like a pretty good deal, considering there's no cell phone service on the trail. They pretty much lose all contact with the outside world. Now picture a dense rainforest with steep, muddy terrain. The hiking trail is littered with boulders and tangled with vines, like nature's own tripwires. It climbs sharply over a mountain, becoming a serious challenge even for someone in good physical shape. The area also gets constant heavy rainfall, which can lead to landslides, flash flooding, and extremely muddy conditions. The situation gets so intense that even the t-shirts and faces of those who make the crossing end up covered in mud. They'll also have to cross a lot of fast-moving rivers. A Venezuelan dad who recently went through the area with his 2 kids said their sneakers ripped apart on the very first day. That's how powerful the rivers can be. And they're deep, too. Sometimes the water reaches all the way up to their shoulders. But the dangers in that area aren't recent. For centuries, the Darien Gap was thought to be impossible to cross. The first Europeans who ventured into Latin America saw it as kind of a jungle training school. They totally knew about its dangers, but still, many adventurers tried to make the crossing in the years that followed. In 1854, for example, an expedition disappeared for 49 days in the jungle, battling starvation and exhaustion. Then again, in 1870, a group of 100 men set out to cross it. Even though they were well prepared and carried cutting-edge equipment for the time, they still suffered tremendously during the journey. They had to rely on incredible resilience to survive the challenge. Over the years, people who ventured in often ended up passing away from hunger, thirst, and even drowning in rivers. They also faced the risk of being attacked by dangerous animals like jaguars, white-lipped pecaries, and the fer-de-lance, a fast, irritable snake that is one of the most venomous out there. The area is also swarming with mosquitoes, which can spread serious health problems. Leaning against trees to rest can also be risky. This jungle is full of spiked chunga palm trees, which are covered in long black spines up to 8 inches long. Unfortunately for us, these spines are covered in all sorts of bacteria. Just brush against a chunga, and you could end up with infected wounds. And yet another danger is getting lost in the dense forest and never finding your way back to safety. These days, though, this risk is a lot lower. Some people have mentioned color-coded markers that help guide travelers and keep them from going the wrong way. If they see blue or green fabric tied to trees, it means keep walking. But if they spot red fabric, that's a sign they're going the wrong way and need to turn around quickly. Since there are so many dangers, why not just build a road through the Darien Gap? While it might seem like a good idea, building a road connecting Panama and Colombia isn't really that simple. The Darien Gap has a humid climate, tough terrain, and constant rainfall, which means any attempt to build a functional road would be highly challenging and super expensive. Even though there have been previous attempts to fill in the gap. See, there's a huge road system called the Pan-American Highway, which stretches all the way from Alaska to the southern tip of Argentina. Nowadays, this highway hits a roadblock right at the Darien Gap. But it wasn't supposed to be like this, as the original idea was for the road to go through there. Leaders from Latin American countries tried to make this plan happen in the 70s, and then again in the 90s. But a lot of people were against it, mainly because they wanted to protect the local communities and the rainforest. Since the Darien Gap is mostly untouched by humans, it's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. It's believed that 1 in 5 species are endemic to the region, meaning they only exist in that specific area, like the Darien pocket gopher and the slatty slender mouse opossum. A road would have really damaged the ecosystem in the area, so the plans were scrapped. Eventually, an alternative was created to travel by sea. At least 2 companies started a ferry service connecting the 2 countries. However, the business wasn't profitable, and they ended up shutting down. Not long ago, Panama decided to close the Darien Gap route. Now they're sealed off with barbed wire fencing. It might just be a matter of time before other routes are created. But if you are an adventurer looking to visit South America, it's probably not best to wait for that. Traveling by plane to Colombia will always be a much safer option.
It was hot in the tropics, a type of heat unknown to the men aboard the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria ships, led by Italian explorer Christopher Columbus. It had been months since these men left their home cities in Europe, and until then, Europe was all they knew. They were given a difficult and even dangerous task. Spain hired Columbus to find a new western route to Asia. They needed new routes for trading and buying spices, but it was far from a simple job. I mean, crossing the ocean never is. Little did those sailors know that their lives were about to change forever. "Land in sight!" someone must have shouted on board. But when they finally stepped on that new foreign land,
they discovered they were not in Asia. They had landed in the Americas. You've probably heard this tale before. Historically speaking, Columbus arrived in the Americas in 1492. But what would have happened if Columbus's ship had faced a lethal storm in the Atlantic Ocean and had never made it to the new land? What would today's history look like? First things first, nobody discovered anything. When we say that the Americas were discovered, we're kind of ignoring the millions of people who already lived there. You see, the Americas were only discovered from Europe's point of view. Columbus would only have discovered something if when he got there, he was faced with acres and acres of empty land. But that was not the case at all. Second, Columbus was not the first explorer to land in the Americas. Believe it or not, the Vikings approached American shores in the 10th century. Their expeditions have been well documented and accepted by scholars. Here's what might have happened. Around the year 1000 CE, Viking explorer Leif Erikson sailed to a place called Vinland. Cute name, huh? It's now a region in Canada called Newfoundland. But his crew didn't stay too long. They arrived to find 10 Native Americans napping under their overturned canoes. They attempted some trade, but I'm guessing the Vikings weren't too friendly and the Americans didn't really like them. The Vikings' account of the encounter shows they felt outnumbered and menaced, so they sailed away back to their land. That makes sense, right? As I said earlier, there were millions of people living in the ginormous continent of the Americas. Any foreigner would be outnumbered there. Now take a look at what North America looked like before our buddy Chris got there. It was not divided into the normal states we're used to. And if Columbus had never arrived, the United States would probably never have been united to begin with. After all, there were hundreds of first Americans living in these lands, and they lived amongst their own tribes, quite different from the Europeans. It's not accurate to think that there were no political systems going on in the Americas before Europeans arrived. We just need to understand that they were different from what we're used to today. When Europeans arrived, they imported their belief systems with them, from religious beliefs and language systems to things as simple as clothing habits. If the Americas had developed on their own, maybe their sense of fashion would be completely different today. You see, Europeans had a developed sense of fashion by the time they arrived in the West. They wore things such as this and this. But those don't really work in the tropics, do they? For them, fashion had to do with showing a certain economic status, while in the Americas, that didn't exist. For Native Americans, clothing was mainly functional and related to the weather. In warmer climates, Native people would wear short-like cloths to cover their intimate parts. They would walk bare-chested and use shoes known as moccasins. Yes, similar to the moccasins you probably own. In colder climates, they would resort to using leather and fur parkas. Of course, there was always the special clothing used for ceremonial purposes. So I'm guessing that if Columbus never reached the Americas, brands such as the Gap, Hollister, and Forever 21 would have never existed. But we could live with that, couldn't we? Here's a wild thought. Let's say that by the 1700s, Native Americans had developed complex engineering skills. They built big boats, maybe a bit smaller in size than the traditional European ships, and decided to venture across the ocean. Let's say they were the ones who arrived on European shores, in places such as Spain and Portugal. They carried gifts and goods with them for trading, of course. This was also a common practice amongst them back home, known as potlatch. Sure, they were received with suspicion by the Europeans, who had only ever traded with Asia. But with this inverted encounter, a different type of relationship began between Native Americans and Europeans. Since Europeans didn't claim ownership of the Americas, the people from the so-called New Land weren't considered inferior to them. Actually, they stood side by side as equals, each one with their own power and set of knowledge. Native Americans taught Europeans a new type of ruling system, a more decentralized one. So modern-day structures of government would look really different. Maybe Europeans decided that 4 years was a long time for someone to hold decision power, so they implemented smaller and more frequent elections. Oh, and the landscape of European cities also changed a lot. Instead of huge statues made of copper and bronze showing men in ships on their way to the Americas, the Europeans built totem poles in honor of their alliances with first Americans. In terms of medical and medicinal knowledge, they had a lot to exchange about. While Europeans were making advances in traditional medicine, Americans had developed an impressive knowledge of herbs that could heal a series of things. Before they knew it, Europeans were selling different varieties of plants in their pharmaceutical establishments. They had one big barrier though: language. Since Europeans never arrived on American shores, they also never taught their language to Americans. So maybe in this scenario, both cultures brought in their best linguists and tried creating a new language from scratch. Something that could be comprehensible from both perspectives, and that could encompass both of their worldviews. The implications of this on modern-day life would be really profound if you stop to think about it. Let's say that this newly created language involved some symbols and drawings in it. You see, Native Americans often told stories using symbols known as pictograms. They were quite literal sometimes. As you can see, a mountain was represented by, well, a mountain. It's crazy to think that this system of communication has been around for 5,000 years, since it was actually invented by the Sumerians. And hey, maybe even our laptop keyboards would come equipped with these symbols, and you could write more visually hybrid and fun emails than the ones you write today. The American landscape would have also changed. You see, if neither Columbus nor any of the other European dudes that went after him reached the so-called New Land, Central and Latin American cities would look completely different than they do today. Maybe the bustling empires of the time, such as the Inca, the Maya, and the Aztec, would have grown immensely. To be fair, they were already pretty big by the time Europeans got there. Some pre-Columbian Maya cities were as big as medieval London and Paris in terms of population. But oh my, the Mayan Empire would have grown so much that it could have spread out all over of Central America. They could have developed their pyramid building craft up to the point that they managed to build an even larger pyramid than the Giza pyramid in Egypt. So tourists would come from all over the world to visit. And in South America, let's just say the region could have turned into a huge forest, bigger than the Amazon. The Inca could have spread through the Andes and then into the mainland. Places such as Brazil and Argentina never existed. But in their place, there would have been dreamy tropical settlements, which would have become a worldwide reference in sustainable living. Did you know that Volusia County in Florida is considered the shark bite capital of the world? Since the 80s, there have been over 300 reported shark bites in New Smyrna Beach. Just for comparison, that's twice as many as in neighboring Brevard County. The water there is super wavy and full of sea creatures, so sharks can't really tell the difference between your foot and a tasty fish snack. But there are definitely other places that are even more dangerous. Take Darwin, up in northern Australia, for example. The ocean there is basically a buffet of danger. This city's coast is famous for having tons of saltwater crocodiles. And did I mention the Irukandji jellyfish? They're super tiny. You can barely see them before they hit you with a venomous sting that makes you feel like it's doomsday. These see-through little creatures cause insane pain and can send your blood pressure through the roof. So if you're thinking of taking a dip in Darwin and see one of these warning signs, maybe just don't. If someone suggests going for a swim in Cipolite Beach in Mexico, do yourself a favor and run the other way. For starters, this place was a hippie hotspot back in the 70s. And let's just say some visitors there prefer to skip the swimsuits altogether, if you know what I mean. But the real problem is the water. The waves and currents over there are wild and can change direction like they've got a mind of their own. So unless you've got a thing for getting tossed around by the ocean, skip Cipolite. Speaking of waves that'll mess you up, let's talk about Hanakapiai Beach. It's a remote spot with turquoise waters and golden sand in Hawaii. Sounds like paradise, right? Wrong. This place is famous for strong currents that will drag you deep into the ocean, faster than you can say aloha. It's believed that over 80 people have drowned there in recent decades. The waves are so powerful that they come all the way up to the shoreline. And if you get swept away by the ocean, hold on to hope, my friend, because there's absolutely no lifeguards out there to hear your screams. Welcome to the Skeleton Coast. Yep, it totally sounds like a horror movie title, and honestly, it kinda is. The name comes from how, one day, whale and seal bones just randomly started showing up on the shore. But these days, the place is even spookier because hundreds of ships have wrecked there over the centuries. And you can literally see their rusty remains scattered along the beaches. The Skeleton Coast gets even creepier thanks to something called the Benguela Current. This ocean current keeps the skies all foggy for most of the year. Plus, the ocean there is seriously rough. So let's just say it's definitely not the place you want to be floating around on your back. Oh, Brazil. What a dreamy summer destination, with the whole northeast region full of warm waters and stunning views. But there's a not-so-great reputation too. Sharks! Boa Viagem Beach is basically plagued by bull and tiger shark attacks. Even with all the please, please don't go in the water signs along the shore, some people still ignore them. Mostly because they think those sharp-toothed creatures are way out there in the deep ocean. But no, they're actually lurking in the shallow waters, just waiting for you to stick one foot in. One minute you're like, let me check the water temperature, and the next minute, you're shark lunch. This place is so dangerous that even lifeguards don't train on the beach anymore. So just promise me you'll stay on the sand, okay? But hey, if sharks are actually your jam, let me tell you about Kansbai in South Africa. This little fishing town in the Western Cape is basically the red carpet for great white sharks. Cage diving there is super popular and considered safe. But free swimming? Yeah, that's a hard pass. And it's not just because you might be swimming around and suddenly hear that Jaws music playing in your head. Nope. The ocean there is gorgeous, but seriously wild. The waters are treacherous and the currents are insanely strong. So if getting tossed around by the ocean like you're in a washing machine sounds like your idea of fun, come on down to Kansbai. Just remember, you've been warned. Who doesn't love a great hot spring, right? But if you ever come across this spot on the island of Dominica, don't go thinking it's just like some natural spa. I'm talking about the Boiling Lake. It looks like a beautiful place to relax, but hiding beneath the surface is volcanic magma. So this water is crazy hot. When it was first discovered, the temperature of the lake ranged from 180 to 197 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's part of what makes the Boiling Lake one of the most dangerous places in the world to go for a swim. I just hope you're gonna pick a much safer spot. So if you're looking for a relaxing day by the ocean without risking your life with dangerous creatures or huge waves, you gotta check out these safe beaches around the world. First up, we've got Bora Bora in French Polynesia. There are a couple of reasons why this place became a major tourist destination. It's all about calm, crystal clear waters and stunning views. It's true that there are some sharks out there, but they're not aggressive at all. Next, there's Paradise Lagoon in Jericoacoara, Brazil. It's got warm, calm waters where you can relax while chilling in hammocks suspended right over the sea. Now, if you're craving some diving but want to keep it safe, try heading to Bonaire in the Caribbean. It's considered an easy diving spot where you can see colorful giant sponges, seahorses, turtles, and all sorts of other chill creatures. Plus, there are quite a few shipwrecks to explore. And while divers should be aware that sharks might be around, encounters are pretty rare and usually not dangerous. Fingers crossed. Because the truth is, even if the spot seems perfectly fine, you're still gonna need some cool life hacks to keep your time in the ocean super safe. First off, no matter what your swimming ability is, always swim with a buddy. The ocean can be super unpredictable, so you have to look out for each other. If you're with a group and the ocean looks rough, do a head count when you get in, buddy up, and count everyone again when you leave the water. Also, always swim in areas that are supervised by a lifeguard. And seriously, do not ignore the warning signs. They're not just there for decoration or to make the beach look cool. They're there to keep you safe. If ocean conditions are rough but not totally life-threatening, you might see a yellow flag on the beach. Red flags warn swimmers about serious hazards in the water. One red flag usually means there's a dangerous current. Two red flags means conditions are so dangerous that even the strongest swimmers should stay out of the water. Next, don't dive into unfamiliar waters. What looks deep might actually be super shallow. Always test the waters and check what's ahead by going in feet first. It's much safer. And last but definitely not least, promise me you will never, ever swim if you see a thunderstorm heading your way. And that's for the same reason you should never stick a hairdryer in the bathtub. Water conducts electricity, so if lightning strikes the ocean, it spreads out, and that could be game over for you. So just stay out of the water, and preferably head home as soon as you can. So there you have it, my friend. Enjoy the ocean and have a blast this summer. Just remember these tips so you don't end up starring in a shark documentary, okay?
The snowpack over your head splits in two right in front of your eyes and starts tumbling down in the frozen slope to its resting place far, far below. Anything in its way is crushed under the immense mass of snow and debris. You're witnessing an avalanche, one of the most dangerous natural disasters. But what if I tell you about another kind of avalanche, no less blood-chilling than the mountain one? And the most bizarre thing about it is that it occurs underwater. Underwater avalanches are powerful and disastrous natural phenomena, often much more dangerous than land ones. They have the potential to wreak havoc on the entire planet, leading to catastrophic consequences. The most alarming thing? They occur all the time under the surface of the ocean, impossible to see, predict, and extremely difficult to measure. Such avalanches can get 100 times larger than land ones, and they pose a great risk to the world's communications, capable of leaving the entire planet without the internet. But we'll talk about it a bit later. First, let's go 60,000 years back into the past. We're near the northwest coast of Africa, ready to witness the colossal scale and devastating impact of a ginormous underwater avalanche. It started as a quite small underwater landslide in the Agadir Canyon. At first, it was just 0.35 cubic miles of material, but in no time, this mass increased more than 100 times in size while traveling across the Atlantic Ocean floor. As the avalanche sped up and grew, it picked up gravel, sand, rocks, and mud. It carved a devastating path through one of the world's largest submarine canyons, wiping out all forms of animal and plant life on its way. The disastrous flow was so powerful that it literally eroded a 250-mile stretch of the canyon, cutting hundreds of feet into its sides and damaging a total area of 1,740 square miles. That's the area of more than 3.5 New York cities. As for the force of the flow, it was so immense that it propelled massive boulders up the canyon walls to heights of up to 430 feet. Before scientists discovered the evidence of this catastrophic event, they had seriously underestimated the scale of destruction caused by submarine avalanches. By the way, these devastating catastrophes can start not only far away in the ocean, but also at estuaries. Let's go back to 14 January 2020 and see for ourselves. A turbidity current, a rapid, downhill flow of water containing a lot of sediment, rushed more than 680 miles from the Congo River estuary in the deep sea. This current appeared due to two factors: terrible flooding along the Congo River in late December 2019 and unusually large spring tides. This resulted in an avalanche of sand and mud. Its volume was equivalent to 1/3 of all the sediment produced annually by all the rivers in the world. This sediment avalanche accelerated increasing in speed from 17 feet per second in the upper part of the Congo Canyon to 26 feet per second when it reached the end of the channel, almost 700 miles away from the coastline. This route made it the longest avalanche of sediment ever measured on our planet. 2 days later, the flow reached the deep ocean. The avalanche broke 2 seabed telecommunication cables, cutting internet data speeds all the way across West, Central, and South Africa. Now, before this disaster, scientists considered that measuring powerful deep-sea avalanches was impractical. But the sediment flow in the Congo Canyon could be monitored directly, finally allowing researchers to assess how major river floods connected to the deep sea. They also concluded that how often underwater avalanches occurred depended on where the observer was. Seafloor canyons that are close to river mouths can experience several tiny avalanches per year. Other systems, far from river discharges like the Agadir Canyon, can only have one monster of an avalanche every 10,000 years or so. You're likely wondering, what can trigger an avalanche under the surface of the ocean? Well, earthquakes, typhoons, high tides, river floods, and even volcanic eruptions. And due to our changing climate, such events become more and more frequent and intense. At the same time, these triggers don't mean that an avalanche is bound to happen, nor do they relate to the scale of the event. See for yourself. In 1755, a powerful earthquake hit the coast of Portugal, wiping out large parts of Lisbon. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives during that disaster, but it only triggered a tiny underwater avalanche. And in 1929, a large earthquake off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, triggered the largest underwater avalanche ever recorded. The flow traveled at a speed of 42 miles per hour, carrying boulders, sand, and mud. It snapped 11 seabed cables on its journey downhill. The avalanche was so powerful, it produced a tsunami that claimed the lives of 28 people along the coastline. Now, submarine avalanches are totally invisible because they happen deep under the ocean's surface, which makes them extremely hard to study. But we must find a way because these flows are super important. They transport sediments, nutrients, and even pollutants across the ocean floor. So, a research team from Liverpool decided to unravel this mystery. Over the last 40 years, they've collected more than 300 samples from the ocean floor. Combined with seismic and bathymetric data, which is a fancy word for ocean mapping, they managed to reconstruct a massive submarine avalanche. It was the first time an underwater avalanche of this size was mapped out. An even cooler thing, the event itself started off pretty modestly, but it quickly evolved into a colossal avalanche that grew to more than 650 feet tall. To put that into perspective, imagine a skyscraper-sized avalanche zooming from Liverpool to London, cutting a trench 100 feet deep and 9 miles wide. Then it spread out over an area bigger than the UK, covering it with several feet of sand and mud. That's like burying a whole country. These findings are actually a big deal because they show that even a small underwater landslide can turn into something massive and super destructive. But that's not the worst. Think about undersea internet cables, which are essential for global communication. There are more than 550 active seafloor cables around the world. Their combined length is a whopping 870,000 miles. That's enough to wrap around our planet 35 times. When a submarine avalanche breaks seafloor cables, the effects are usually super expensive and devastating. For example, in 2006, an earthquake in Taiwan triggered underwater avalanches that cut loads of seafloor cables connecting Southeast Asia with the rest of the world. The largest internet operator in China had a 90% loss of traffic to the USA at the peak of the event. As for Taiwan itself, it experienced between 74 to 100% loss in traffic to neighboring islands. So now you probably get why we need to learn more about this natural phenomenon. Luckily, researchers at Tulane University have found a way to study it in 3D. Previous studies only looked at submarine avalanches in 2D, which didn't give the full picture of how they actually behaved. The new research focused on how underwater flows interacted with mini basins, natural features on the ocean floor that look like shallow bowls. Despite being called mini, these bowls can be huge, up to 4 square miles. When turbidity currents flow into these mini basins, they don't just stop. No, they hit the far side and curl back around like water eddies in a stream. These swirling flows move the sediment around before it settles on the ocean floor. The size of the mini basin and the speed of the flow can change how the current behaves. If the basin is big and the current is slow, it starts to fill up with sediment. But if you crank up the flow speed or shrink the basin, the current starts to overflow, spilling over the basin. To study all this, the researchers created a mini version of a mini basin in a pool and used different speeds of flow to simulate turbidity currents. They even made their own sediment mixtures to see how different sizes of particles would behave. In the end, they managed to mimic real-life ocean conditions, but on a smaller, manageable scale. Pretty cool, huh? Around 5.3 million years ago, a crucial event reshaped the Mediterranean region. It was a colossal flood that refilled the local sea, which had been extremely barren and salty up until that point. It got the name Zanclean Flood, and it forever changed the geography of the area. The Mediterranean Sea is surrounded by Europe, Africa, and Asia, and connects to the ocean by the Strait of Gibraltar. This is quite a narrow passage, measuring about 8 miles. It may not be that wide, but the strait plays a crucial role in maintaining the liquid balance between these two bodies of water. About 6 million years ago, a bunch of things might have caused the Mediterranean to be cut off from the Atlantic Ocean. Some say it was an ice age. Others speak of tectonic movements, like earthquakes. Whatever the cause, it pushed the Mediterranean area into a period called the Mycenaean Salinity Crisis. For about 1,000 years, the sea slowly evaporated, leaving behind a dry basin that was several miles below sea level. This crisis really changed the landscape, creating conditions similar to those found in today's Dead Sea. What this means is that the lush Mediterranean beauty used to be a super salty environment, containing nearly 10 times more salt than the ocean. Say you could have visited. You would have been able to effortlessly float on the little water you could find, even if you're not a skilled swimmer. The amount of salt and that mineral content would have made it challenging for most creatures to survive. However, some hardy microorganisms, such as bacteria, could have adapted to these harsh conditions. These days, at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, we can find holes as large as the Grand Canyon, and they seem to have formed during that same period of dehydration. Evidence suggests that massive rivers, such as the Nile and the Rhone, flowed directly into the Mediterranean back then, leaving behind canyons as they reached the bottom, thousands of feet below the sea level. People had to find some sort of explanation back in the day for the drying of the Mediterranean, so they came up with myths and legends. One such tale was told by the people of southern Iberia, in modern-day Spain and Portugal. It was also recounted by a famous Roman writer called Pliny the Elder. What this legend said was that the Mediterranean used to be cut out from the ocean until the hero Hercules, with his mighty sword, carved a path. He did so between a fictional location in modern-day Africa and the Rock of Gibraltar. This allowed the ocean waters to flow in, transforming the Mediterranean into what we know today. Some fossils also seem to confirm the unusually large flood. Remains of marine organisms were found in layers high above current sea levels. This means the areas were once submerged underwater. These fossils belong to mollusks, fish, and marine mammals. Because of modern techniques, we now have at least an estimated timing of the Zanclean flood. Scientists used computer simulations to reconstruct the event, providing further evidence that it was real. What they also discovered is that there's a possibility the Mediterranean might change once more. The Strait of Gibraltar could close, most likely because of movements deep under the ground. This could lead to the Mediterranean becoming dry again, over a span of about 1,000 years. The Mediterranean area could disappear altogether if the African continent keeps shifting north too, getting closer to Europe. Another one of those famous yet still a bit hypothetical large floods is called the Black Sea Deluge Theory. Some scientists think that around 8,400 years ago, water from the Mediterranean might have spilled over into the Black Sea through a narrow passage called the Bosporus Strait. This could have caused a massive disaster, forcing people living near the Black Sea to pack up their things and move further inside the continent in both Europe and Asia. Along with them, they might have carried stories about this colossal flood. The specialist that came up with this idea also suggested that these migrating people might have brought along new ways of farming. Not everyone from the scientific community is convinced, though. Some argue that while there might have been a flood, it likely happened earlier and was way smaller. They didn't think this flood could have caused, for example, the story of Noah's Ark. In this legend, a spiritual man was warned by a higher entity that a giant flood was on its way. The man went to gather pairs of animals and pack them all in a boat to make sure these species would survive the devastating flood. There was also the concern among scholars that discussing real floods and ancient stories too much might blur the lines between science and fiction. There may be other reasons why these flood stories are so often found across different cultures all over our planet. One idea is that floods were incredibly destructive for early farmers, so they invented myths about them signaling the end of the world. Another idea is that people stumbled upon ancient sea creature fossils in unusual places, leading them to believe there was a significant flood in the past. The solution to future floods, though, might be floating cities. As sea levels continue to rise, coastal cities like Amsterdam, New Orleans, and Venice may go under. So, floating infrastructure may be the way to go, with buildings that can rise with the water levels, making them able to resist extreme weather too. Countries like the Netherlands, which have a history of managing water risks, are pioneering these floating creations. With cities running out of space for expansion, we might be forced to move on water anyway. By moving on the water, we can reduce crowding and create more interesting ways to feed ourselves, like floating gardens. These homes also come with great alternatives to our energy needs through systems that use solar and wind power. Not to mention that these homes might turn out to be cheaper in the long run. One such floating city might pop up soon in the Maldives. Its goal is to host up to 20,000 people and will feature places to live and eat, but also shops and schools. Designed to look like coral, the region will include canals placed between some 5,000 floating pieces of land. The city will be constructed using modular units, put together in a construction site nearby. After they're completed, they'll be towed to the floating city. The next step is to secure them to a large underwater concrete hull, which is screwed tightly to the seabed on some steel stilts. All these pieces of construction let the modular units easily move as naturally as the sea. Even for those that are afraid of seasickness, there's a solution. That's what the nearby coral reef is for. It will surround the city, making a natural wave breaker. Human-made coral banks will also be placed underneath the city, which will also help coral grow naturally. The long-term goal is to make the establishment self-sufficient. It will have electricity, mostly from on-site solar power. Waste will be treated nearby and reused as plant fertilizer. Instead of air conditioning, the city will use deep-sea water cooling. This method pumps cold water from the deep sea to cool the area, saving energy. Earth is not the only planet that's seen some serious floods. In ancient times, Mars seems to have experienced them too, and they played an important role in shaping its surface. Recent research reveals that billions of years ago, Mars was heavily affected by some serious river flooding, which contributed to the formation of its valleys and canyons. The reason for these floods was heavy rainfall, which reshaped the Martian landscape in a jiffy, at times even within days or weeks. Unlike Earth, where rivers form pretty slowly, Mars experienced rapid changes because of these floods, particularly around 4 billion years ago. We've known for quite some time that there have been floods on Mars, but this study really showed us their extent. We now know they were more widespread and frequent than previously thought.
Doggerland? No, it's not a country of dogs, as you probably first thought. It's a land the size of Great Britain in the north of Europe. But don't bother trying to find it on the map of the old continent. your search will come back empty. Doggerland hasn't existed for thousands of years. But where was it exactly? And did humans live here? Scientists are doing their best to answer these questions. Let's start with the name. In the 1990s, a British archaeologist named the area Doggerland after Dogger Bank, a sandbank some 60 miles off the east coast of England. The word probably comes from Dutch. It was used for a fishing boat with 2 masts. Makes sense, since today, the North Sea is a rich fishing area. But thousands of years ago, people living here had a different diet. Some 12,000 years ago, the last major ice age was slowly reaching its end. Doggerland didn't feature seawater, but marshlands, lagoons, forests, and gently sloping hills. At that time, Britain and Ireland weren't islands. They sat deep inland. You could set off in Denmark and walk all the way to the north of Scotland. There was a system of rivers that emptied themselves in the North Sea. Back then, it was more of a channel that separated Doggerland from Norway. The rivers were different too. The Thames flowed into the Rhine. The ancient river they formed flowed into the place of today's English Channel and emptied itself into the Atlantic Ocean. Doggerland even featured a lake. There were some glaciers as well, but the land was still inhabitable. So who lived there? There were communities of hunter-gatherers from the Middle Stone Age. This was the time of human history when our ancestors mastered chipped stone tools. They used these stones with sharp edges for spears and arrowheads. This came in handy at Doggerland, which was the richest hunting area in all of Europe. It could have easily been the most populated region in the northwestern part of the continent. The hunters' prey likely consisted of reindeer, mammoths, oxen, wild pigs, brown bears, wolves, and many other species. In short, nobody went hungry here. Meat wasn't the only thing on the menu. Ancient residents of Doggerland collected hazelnuts and berries. They lived in wooden huts. They built them close to rivers, and they even constructed their settlements on hills. Remember Dogger Bank? It now sits underwater, but it used to be a mountainous region. Doggerland must have been prime real estate in prehistoric times. Its total surface area was over 18,000 miles, but things were about to go under. Literally. The last ice age was ending. All the water trapped in glaciers and ice sheets started to melt. You experience this process firsthand every time you order a cold drink. Even if you drink it bottoms up, after a while, the glass is full again. Why? Because the ice cubes have melted. Think of Doggerland as that glass. The sea levels started rising quickly. Every century, the sea flooded from 3 to 6 feet of dry land. Just imagine what this would mean today. Miami's elevation is just over 6 feet. The city would be flooded in less than 100 years. But there was one event that speeded things up. The Storegga Slides were a series of submarine landslides in the Norwegian Sea thousands of years ago. And what happens when huge chunks of Earth shift suddenly underwater? Gigantic waves. You probably know what a tsunami is. Doggerland was likely pounded by several of them. They were so powerful that researchers believe they washed away Great Britain's land bridge to the rest of the continent. All that was left of Doggerland was an island the size of Wales. Scientists estimate that the waves of this ancient tsunami were at least 40 feet high. Some 6,000 years ago, Doggerlanders were on the move. They were migrating to higher grounds, England and the Netherlands in their case. The ironic part is that when we literally translate the name of the country of Netherlands into English, we get lower lands. But thousands of years ago, this was higher ground for hunter-gatherers escaping the flood. Once it was all over, the continent of Europe got the shape we easily recognize today. But Doggerland was nowhere to be seen. It's been sitting under the waves of the North Sea for 8,200 years. Does the idea of Doggerland remind you of a more famous case of a submerged land? The lost city of Atlantis comes straight to mind. But there is an important difference. Atlantis is only a legend. Everything we know about it comes from the writings of the Greek philosopher Plato. Scientists have been searching for Atlantis for a long time, and up to this day, they can't even agree where exactly it was. Theories range from the Mediterranean to even Antarctica. Doggerland is not a myth. Everything science knows about this lost land comes from hard evidence. In 1931, a fishing boat was doing its thing off the coast of Norfolk in England. At the time, the crew would drag a net along the sea floor, sweeping everything in its path. And they caught something more than fish. It was peat, like the stuff we find in Alaska and in Ireland. But what was it doing at the bottom of the North Sea? It didn't belong there, because seawater destroys peat. There was only one possible explanation. The area must have been dry land at some point in history. The final proof was that the peat contained a harpoon spear point, a sure sign of human activity. The idea wasn't new, though. Since the Middle Ages, there has been talk of submerged land with underwater forests. In 1913, a British geologist came forward with the idea of an undersea world in this part of Europe. Scientific evidence kept piling up. Local fishermen started pulling out human-made tools and animal bones. Researchers dated them to be around 9,000 years old. But the deep, murky waters of the North Sea made it impossible to send down divers. One archaeologist noted that they knew more about the surface of the moon than what lay at the bottom of this relatively shallow sea. The discovery of oil in the area in the 1960s was a real game changer. Companies from the industry provided seismic survey data to scientists. This helped them piece together the full image of what Doggerland used to look like. Computer models soon produced images of river valleys, coastlines, freshwater lakes, and hills. There are even footprints of nomadic tribes preserved on the sea floor. Today, marine biologists are using magnetic fields to map out this lost underwater world. But Doggerland isn't the only place on Earth that went under the waves. Beringia is another lost world of global importance. This used to be a land bridge between Asia and North America. It got its name from the Bering Strait. It is 53 miles wide at its narrowest point. But until the end of the last ice age, this was dry land that our human ancestors called home. Genetic evidence shows that Native Americans lived in Beringia for some 15,000 years. If you want to imagine what this land looked like, think of present-day Arctic Alaska. It was a shrub tundra. There were also small willows and birches. Sorry, no woolly mammoths. Large grazing animals simply wouldn't have had enough food in Beringia, though there were probably elk and bighorn sheep in the area. But the Ice Age wouldn't last forever. Like in Doggerland, sea levels started to rise. This happened some 13,000 years ago. It wasn't all bad news, though. Scientific evidence suggests that around this time, people started moving south. They left the slowly sinking Beringia and crossed over into Alaska. From there, they populated both Americas. These were the ancestors of Native American tribes.
On January 26, 1700, one of the biggest earthquakes in history hit off the coast of the United States. It had a magnitude of 9, which puts it in the top 10 most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. This earthquake triggered a huge tsunami and changed the coastline all the way from southern British Columbia down to northern California forever. Back then, the area wasn't very populated, but thanks to some clever research, scientists figured out exactly what happened that day by looking at old geological records, tree rings, and even some history from Japan. On the same day as the earthquake, a massive tsunami also hit Japan's eastern coast. For a long time, no one connected the two, but in the 1980s and 90s, researchers realized the tsunami in Japan had been caused by the earthquake in the Pacific Northwest. They were also able to pinpoint the exact day, January 26, 1700. They even found old trees in coastal Washington that had all perished around the winter of 1700. which matched up perfectly with the timing of the earthquake. The earthquake came from the Cascadia subduction zone, a fault where the Juan de Fuca plate slides under the North American plate. This fault stretches about 700 miles, from northern Vancouver Island in British Columbia to Cape Mendocino in California. The pressure from the moving plates builds up over time, and eventually, another big, devastating earthquake will hit the same region. It's just a matter of time. By looking at the geological records, past tsunami deposits, and signs of land level changes, scientists can figure out how often these huge earthquakes happen. Emergency planners have been preparing for the next big quake, often calling it the big one. Scientists believe earthquakes in the Cascadia subduction zone happen every 200 to 1,000 years. And since the last major one was over 300 years ago, the Pacific Northwest is definitely due for another. When it happens, the earthquake is expected to be as big as the one from 1700. But this time, it'll affect around 15 million people. The devastation will be severe. Buildings will collapse, roads and runways will crack, and bridges will fall. Communication in and out of the area will be cut off. But the worst part? The earthquake will trigger a massive tsunami that might hit parts of the Washington coast in as little as 10 minutes. It's not a matter of if, but when the Cascadia subduction zone will break. When it happens, it will be the worst disaster the US has ever faced. Worse than the Hurricane Katrina or Superstorm Sandy. It'll impact an enormous area, stretching from southern British Columbia all the way down through Oregon to northern California. That means millions and millions of people will be affected. Fairchild is considered a backup staging area for handling the aftermath of the earthquake, with Grant County International Airport in Moses Lake being the main one. For those who will survive the initial quake and tsunami, the aftermath could be just as disastrous. Aftershocks will follow, and transportation will be a mess. Roads will be damaged or completely blocked, airports will shut down, and most of the main routes, like Interstate 5, will have bridges destroyed. This means food and water supplies will be cut off, and it will be incredibly difficult for help to get in or for people to escape. Gas pipelines will most likely be damaged too, and restoring them could take anywhere from a few days inland to weeks or even months along the coast. Power outages will be widespread within 100 miles of the coast throughout the entire Pacific Northwest. And water could be out for 3 to 7 months. Even telecommunications will be down for 2 to 3 months across the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, and even parts of East Asia. The good news for eastern Washington is that it will mostly avoid the worst of it, thanks to natural barriers between the west and east sides of the state. The tsunami may hit the Columbia River Gorge, but it will lose energy quickly because of a sandbar under the river. The Cascade Mountains will absorb much of the earthquake's impact, so the east side won't feel it as strongly. And since eastern Washington won't get hit as hard, it'll be up to them to handle the aftermath of the quake. That means helping western Washington, taking in refugees from the areas that got destroyed, and delivering supplies to where they're needed. Scientists have looked at other major 8.0 to 9.0 magnitude earthquakes like the ones in Chile in 1960, Alaska in 1964, and Sumatra in 2004, and Japan in 2011. These kinds of quakes can shake the ground for anywhere between 6 to 10 minutes, and that's a long time for the ground to be shaking. Such quakes are super intense because they happen close to Earth's surface, so it's not just a quick shake, it's a long, strong one that can cause a lot of damage. If the Cascadia earthquake and tsunami were to hit tomorrow, over 13,800 people could lose their lives, and about 107,000 people could be injured. The economic toll in Washington, Oregon, and California could top 70 billion. To put that into perspective, we can compare these numbers with some other major earthquakes. In Chile's 1960 earthquake, about 1,650 people lost their lives. The 1964 Alaska quake resulted in around 140 lives lost. The 2004 Sumatra earthquake and tsunami took the lives of an estimated 280,000 people. And the 2011 Japan earthquake and tsunami caused over 20,000 casualties. Authorities know about the dangers of the Cascadia Fault, but even with all the planning, no one can say for sure what will be needed when the big quake hits. Right after the earthquake and tsunami, the areas outside the immediate disaster zone won't be able to help much because roads and airports will be destroyed, and resources will be limited. How can we deal with this kind of disaster and its effects? We don't have all the answers yet. Right now, let's focus on the Cascadia subduction zone. It's a huge fault line that stretches about 620 miles from Vancouver Island to Cape Mendocino in California, sitting about 93 miles off the coast. It's like one tectonic plate is slowly sliding under another. When the plates are close to the surface, about 18 miles deep or less, they get stuck because of friction, kind of like pushing two rocks together. Over time, this creates a lot of pressure. When the pressure finally becomes too much, the plates slip, causing a massive earthquake. This is called a megathrust earthquake, and it can be huge. Below the area where the plates are stuck, there's a zone where the plates move really slowly. We're talking about just a few inches every few months. This slow movement helps to release some of the pressure, but it also builds up more pressure on the parts of the fault that are still stuck. This means that over time, it increases the chances of a huge earthquake happening. These massive quakes, called Great Subduction Zone earthquakes, can be stronger than magnitude 8.5. Megathrust earthquakes are the biggest earthquakes that happen. They can go over a magnitude of 9.0, which is insanely powerful. Just to put it in perspective, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake releases 1,000 times more energy than a 7.0 and a million times more energy than a 5.0. These earthquakes happen when a lot of pressure builds up in a part of the fault that's locked, which means the plate can't move past each other. When that pressure gets too high, the fault finally ruptures, releasing all that built-up energy in one massive shake. The Cascadia subduction zone is super long. That's why if it were to rupture all at once, it could produce a large earthquake. Scientists have studied this region and found that about 18 miles below the surface, the fault is completely locked. The plates there aren't sliding past each other. But deeper down, the plates start to slide more smoothly, causing less friction. This is important because it tells us how much stress is building up in that locked zone, and how it could eventually lead to a major earthquake.
Imagine standing in a quiet northern town, surrounded by mountains and forests, when the ground beneath your feet suddenly shifts with the force of a freight train. That's not a movie scene. It's a very real possibility for the people living in Dawson City, Canada. Hidden beneath the tranquil Yukon landscape lies a geological giant, the Tintina Fault. For more than 12,000 years, it has been silent, but new research suggests it might be ready to wake up in a spectacular and dangerous way. Stretching over 1,000 kilometers from the Yukon into Alaska, the Tintina Fault is like a massive crack in Earth's crust, a boundary where colossal slabs of rock slowly grind past each other. On the surface, it looks harmless, just rugged terrain, rivers, and forests. But deep underground, strain is quietly building, like a spring being wound tighter and tighter. Theron Findlay, a geologist from the University of Victoria, and his team decided to take a closer look at a section of this fault near Dawson City. This wasn't just a casual inspection. They used cutting-edge tools like high-resolution satellite images, aerial surveys, and LiDAR, a laser-based scanning method that can reveal subtle changes in the ground's shape. What they found was unsettling. In one location, the ground was visibly displaced by an astonishing 1,000 meters, evidence of a long series of powerful earthquakes millions of years ago. In another area, they spotted a smaller but still significant offset of about 75 meters, likely caused by more recent quakes, roughly 132,000 years ago. Since then, nothing major. At least, nothing visible. And that's exactly the problem. When a fault line hasn't released energy for thousands of years, it doesn't mean it's safe. Quite the opposite. It could mean that massive pressure has been silently accumulating. Based on their calculations, the Tintina Fault has been moving at a slow creep of up to 0.8 millimeters per year. Over 12,000 years, that adds up to a staggering 6 meters of potential movement waiting to be unleashed. If that strain were to suddenly break free, the resulting earthquake could be bigger than magnitude 7.5. For context, that's in the same league as some of the most destructive quakes in history, like the 1976 Tangshan earthquake in China, or the 2010 Haiti disaster. While the Yukon isn't densely populated, the impact could still be devastating, damaging highways, collapsed buildings, landslides cutting off communities, and potentially loss of life. The scientists can't say when it will happen. Earthquakes don't work on a schedule, and predicting the exact moment of rupture is one of geology's greatest challenges. What they do know is that the Tintina Fault is in what's called a late stage of its seismic cycle, a point where the risk of a major quake is higher. For the people of Dawson City and surrounding areas, this means living with a quiet but ever-present threat. Emergency planners might advise residents to have evacuation routes, survival kits, and backup communication plans. But in the end, this is a reminder of a simple truth. Earth is never truly still. Even in the most peaceful landscapes, immense forces are always at work, reshaping the planet in ways we can't always see, until the day they reveal themselves with a violent jolt. Yet, the story of the Tintina Fault is more than a warning. It's a glimpse into how Earth stores and releases its pent-up energy. Each millimeter of annual movement is like another twist of a key in a lock. At some point, the lock will turn, and when it does, the release will be sudden and powerful. LiDAR images reveal ancient scars across the land, subtle to the untrained eye, but obvious to scientists. These are the footprints of past disasters, frozen in the ground like a history book carved by nature. Finley and his colleagues believe the region's seismic silence has lulled people into a false sense of security. A place can be both beautiful and dangerous, and the Yukon is a perfect example. Visitors come for the sweeping vistas and endless wilderness, rarely realizing that deep beneath their hiking trails and scenic roads, forces are shifting that could change the landscape overnight. This hidden drama plays out all over the world. Fault lines in California, Turkey, Japan, and beyond all share one trait. They eventually break. The question is never if, but when. The Tintina Fault just happens to be one of the quieter players, which in geological terms can be far more ominous than the noisy ones. And so, the clock ticks, silently, in the frozen north, counting down to a moment no one can see coming.
Before an earthquake shakes the ground, something sneaky might happen first. A slow, quiet movement with no shaking at all. No one is aware that right under their feet, the land is preparing to tremble violently, wreaking havoc, bringing destruction and devastation. A new study shows that such a slow creep might be how earthquakes begin. To figure this out, scientists didn't start with giant pieces of the earth. Instead, they went into a lab and used clear plastic sheets called plexiglass. They pushed two sheets of plexiglass sideways against each other, just like how tectonic plates, huge chunks of Earth's crust, push against each other underground. As they pushed, the plastic cracked, kind of like what the Earth does during an earthquake. And even though it was plastic and not rock, the physics, the way things break and move, was the same. Earthquakes happen when two tectonic plates try to slide past each other, but they get stuck. The edges between them don't move easily because of something called friction. It's kind of like when your shoes grip the ground. Over time, the plates keep trying to move and stress builds up. Think of it like bending a stick. At first, it doesn't break, but if you keep pushing, it will eventually snap. The spot where the plates are stuck is called a fault, and there's a thin, brittle part in that fault. By brittle, I mean that it doesn't bend, it just breaks. Here's how it happens. First, a tiny crack forms. It's small and moves slowly. There's no shaking yet, but something is already happening under the surface. The crack spreads, building up more energy. When it finally reaches the edge of the brittle zone, boom! It speeds up, suddenly racing forward really fast, almost as fast as sound, and that's when the Earth starts to shake. So scientists decided to find out how that very first crack starts. They conducted their experiment, whose setup was similar to a type of fault in the real world called a strike-slip fault, like the San Andreas Fault in California. Even though the materials, plastic versus rock, are different, the way cracks form and move is exactly the same. The experiment has helped scientists understand that earthquakes don't always start suddenly. Sometimes there's a slow, quiet start, like a warning sign before the big quake. This early stage of an earthquake is called a nucleation front. It's like a seed of a crack, gently creeping through the material long before any actual rupture happens. This quiet and slow movement doesn't release energy into the surroundings. At first, scientists thought of cracks as simple one-dimensional lines, like a straight tear in paper. But something didn't add up. The slow-moving nucleation front wasn't behaving like a normal fast-moving crack, and it wasn't clear why or how it suddenly sped up and became an earthquake. The answer came when scientists realized they had to think in two dimensions instead of one. Instead of imagining the crack as just a fine line, they began to think of it as a patch, like a growing circle, that starts at the surface where two materials touch. As this patch spreads out, more material along its edge has to break. The important thing here is that the energy needed to break the material is related to how long the patch's edge or perimeter becomes. The bigger the perimeter, the more energy it takes to keep breaking. That's why this patch moves slowly at first. It doesn't yet cause the violent shaking we associate with an earthquake. Because it moves without sending shaking waves, this stage is called aseismic. Eventually, the growing crack patch spreads beyond the special brittle zone, where the materials are stuck. Outside this zone, the energy needed to keep breaking the material doesn't increase anymore. Instead, there's now extra energy building up, more than what's needed to keep the crack growing slowly. This extra energy doesn't stay quiet. It suddenly powers the crack to move much faster, turning it into a full-speed rupture. That's the moment when the earthquake begins and the ground starts to shake. These findings help explain how earthquakes might start off slow and silent before quickly turning dangerous. They show that small, slow cracks can suddenly transform into powerful, fast-moving ruptures if the conditions are right. Scientists believe that they can learn to detect the aseismic stage before a crack speeds up. It might one day be possible to predict earthquakes, or at least understand the warning signs better. Now, even though earthquakes are only the third most common type of natural disaster, they cause the highest number of fatalities. NASA plays an important role in studying earthquakes by using satellites that orbit the Earth. These satellites collect data and images that show how the ground changes after an earthquake. For example, they can detect when the land shifts, rises, sinks, or cracks. These surface changes help scientists learn more about the strength and impact of earthquakes. NASA's satellites can also track changes in nighttime lights. If a city goes dark after a quake, that's a clear sign that the area may have lost power and could need help. Now, how about we talk about the most common earthquake myths, like the one about megaquakes? Some people really worry about super huge earthquakes, but there's a limit to how big they can get. The size of an earthquake depends on the size of the fault where it happens. A longer and deeper fault can cause a bigger earthquake. For example, the San Andreas Fault in California is long, about 800 miles, but not very deep, around 10 to 12 miles. This makes earthquakes bigger than magnitude 8.3 on that fault very unlikely. The biggest earthquake ever recorded happened in Chile in 1960. It had a magnitude of 9.5 and occurred on a huge fault that was almost 1,000 miles long and 150 miles wide. Technically, there's no set limit on the magnitude scale, but an earthquake bigger than magnitude 12 would need a fault larger than Earth, which just isn't possible. Now, earthquakes can happen near the surface or deep underground. Most occur in Earth's crust or upper mantle, down to about 500 miles deep. But the deepest ones happen only at subduction zones, places where one part of Earth's crust slides under another. In California, almost all earthquakes happen in the top 15 miles of the crust. One exception is the Cascadia subduction zone in Northern California, which continues up through Oregon, Washington, and Canada. Another misconception is that the ground can open during an earthquake, but usually that only happens in movies. A giant crack opening and swallowing things up during an earthquake is just fiction. In real life, the ground on either side of a fault slides past each other. It doesn't pull apart or open wide. Small cracks or holes can happen during landslides or ground failures, but not along the actual fault line itself. Faults don't open up because if they did, there'd be no friction, and without friction, there wouldn't be an earthquake at all. Now, some people think California could break off and sink into the ocean during an earthquake, but that's not how it happens. The ocean floor is just lower land with water above it. California can't fall in. What's really happening is that southwestern California is slowly sliding north toward Alaska along the San Andreas Fault. The Pacific Plate, which California sits on, is moving about 2 inches per year, about as fast as your fingernails grow. So, in about 15 million years, Los Angeles and San Francisco could be neighbors. And in 70 million years, Los Angeles might be sitting near Alaska. I can't wait. People often wonder whether an aftershock can be bigger than the earthquake itself. Aftershocks are smaller earthquakes that happen in the same area after a larger one. They're like our planet's way of settling down after the main shock. But if an aftershock turns out to be bigger than the first earthquake, then we call the bigger one the main shock, and the earlier one becomes a foreshock. About 5 to 10% of earthquakes in California are followed by a stronger one within a week. It's also possible for two quakes in the same area to be about the same size. However, very large earthquakes are rare, so it's even rarer to see two huge ones happen close together. The Earth. Frozen and alone, exiled into deep space. Jupiter, the only remaining planet orbiting the Sun. No, it's not a premise for a disaster movie. It's one of many real scenarios scientists explored in their latest simulations. This time, the threat isn't the Sun swelling or a giant asteroid knocking planets into it like a cosmic bowling ball. It's something quieter and possibly already on its way. A recent study examined the potential consequences of a passing star coming too close. One such flyby could send planets crashing, flinging them into space, or mess with their orbits just enough to cause climate changes. But what are passing stars, and how likely is that to occur? Passing stars are normal stars, like our Sun, that move around the Milky Way. Since everything in space is always moving, sometimes stars pass near each other. Usually it's not a big deal. But if a star gets really close, its gravity can tug on planets like Neptune. That tiny tug can slowly change how the planets move, like a ripple spreading through the whole system. Scientists study these close encounters because, even though they don't happen often, they can have big effects over millions of years. They help us understand shifts in planetary orbits and how they may have shaped Earth's past. In fact, one theory suggests that a flyby 56 million years ago is what caused great climate change when Earth's temperature rose by up to 14 degrees Fahrenheit in just a few 100,000 years. That huge temperature jump changed life on Earth, leading to the evolution of some species while causing others to disappear. Even though it's impossible to prove whether there was a flyby a long time ago, we do know that events like this could mess with Earth's orbit in the long run. That's in the past, but what about the future? So far, we know that the solar system will have a close encounter with another star called Gliese 710 in about 1.3 million years. Gliese is moving towards us and is projected to pass within 10,000 astronomical units of the Sun. It won't come close enough to throw planets off, but it could still send icy comets from the Oort cloud our way, like a bored kid tossing a snowball without looking. One might hit something, but probably won't. However, in a recent study, scientists wanted to explore a more extreme scenario. What if a star passed even closer, say just 100 astronomical units from the Sun? That's about 100 times the distance from Earth to the Sun. From our point of view, it's almost unimaginably far, but in space, it's practically brushing shoulders. They ran thousands of long-term simulations covering up to 5 billion years of our solar system's future, and it turns out it doesn't take much. Just one close encounter can be enough to disturb the outer planets, like Neptune, and set off a slow-motion chain reaction that ripples inward. Over time, that gentle nudge can throw the whole system into chaos, a true cosmic butterfly effect. The good news is that even in this worst-case scenario, in 95% of simulations, the passage is nothing to worry about, and all the planets remain in place. However, in the remaining 5%, well, it's one disaster after another. The most frequent casualty in these simulations was Mercury. In nearly half of all unstable scenarios, Mercury ends up on a doomed path straight into the Sun. It's the smallest planet and the closest to our star, so it's especially susceptible to gravitational nudges, whether from the gas giants or from a disturbance rippling inward from a stellar flyby. When Mercury spirals into the Sun, you might think it's game over for the rest of the planets, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the system absorbs the loss and restabilizes, like an orchestra that keeps playing even after one violinist falls off the stage. Oops. Funny enough, Mercury already has a chaotic orbit, the most stretched and tilted of all major planets, and some studies already consider its fall into the Sun in the distant future inevitable. Now, Venus has a slightly better chance in these chaotic scenarios. It doesn't get ejected or swallowed by the Sun as often as Mercury, but it's far from being safe. Most of the time, the instability happens after Mercury goes rogue and disrupts Venus's orbit, nudging it into a slow-motion crash course with Earth or Mars. Even without the interference from field stars, long-term simulations show a tiny but real chance that Venus could eventually collide with Earth just from the way Jupiter affects Mercury. A Venus-Earth collision would result in both planets being completely destroyed. Oh well. A similar fate awaits Mars. According to simulations, in about 0.3% of cases, it either gets flung out of the solar system or collides with another planet. Mars is smaller and lighter than Earth, with weaker gravity, which makes it easier to knock it off track. What's interesting is that even in some cases where Mars is lost, Earth often manages to stay in place. Jupiter happens to be the heavyweight champion of the solar system, the proud owner of its own cloudy belts. Thanks to its massive size and strong gravity, it acts like an anchor, keeping everything else in check. There are 392 scenarios out of 12,000 simulations where all but one planet vanished, with Jupiter being the last one standing. Its stabilizing influence helps prevent smaller planets from going off course, and in some cases, it even helps the system recover after a disruption. Saturn, while less massive, seems to be Jupiter's loyal partner. But models show that when Saturn shifts its orbit abruptly, it can send gravitational ripples, known as secular resonances, straight into the inner solar system, nudging the orbits of planets like Earth and Mars. Finally, the most vulnerable ones are Uranus and Neptune. Sitting at the edge of the solar system, they're the easiest to knock loose, and in many simulations, they get ejected entirely. That loss sends gravitational ripples inward, disturbing the rest of the planets over millions of years. Even a tiny shift by 0.1% in Neptune's orbital distance can throw the whole solar system out of sync. The balance of gravitational forces would shift, forcing Jupiter and Saturn to readjust, which would push the disturbance toward the inner planets, destabilizing everything. Which brings us to the big question: what about Earth? While most simulated models leave Earth untouched, about 0.2% of the simulations end with Earth either colliding with another planet, Venus, or being thrown into the Sun. Out of 12,000 simulations, in 23 of those, Earth ends up as the only one still orbiting. But that's only if we don't include the Moon in calculations. With the Moon included, Earth becomes harder to predict. Our satellite could crash into Earth, get ripped away by a passing star, or destabilize our orbit over millions of years. Once again, this is a worst-case scenario, and while the odds are really small, it's not impossible. So, with that in mind, let's entertain the idea and see what would happen to Earth if it were to end up exiled from the solar system. Earth would become what scientists call a rogue planet, drifting through interstellar space with no sun to anchor it. The surface would quickly freeze, with temperatures dropping to hundreds of degrees below zero. But surprisingly, life wouldn't vanish completely. Earth's core would stay hot for billions of years, powered by radioactive decay and leftover heat from its formation. That heat could keep underground pockets warm. Scientists believe that this is the case with icy moons like Europa or Enceladus. Life might cling on in different caves or buried oceans. It wouldn't be a thriving world, but it wouldn't be completely empty either, at least for a while. Just cold, quiet, and alone, a ghost of a once lively world. And somewhere out there, maybe another civilization will look up, spot a faint blue dot drifting by, and curiously start running simulations of what might happen if this blue planet were to get really close, say just 100 AU from their sun.
Roofs fly off like paper, huge trees are yanked from the ground, power lines snap and leave neighborhoods in the dark. Streets flood like rivers, homes are left in ruins. That's a hurricane passing through. After the wind calms down, the real mess begins. People stranded, no clean water, destroyed roads. Storms have been picking up for like 5,700 years. And the scariest part is that in the last 20 years, there's been a huge spike. But let's start from the very beginning. This is Belize, a small country on the northeastern coast of Central America. And this is the Great Blue Hole, a huge, deep underwater sinkhole about 410 feet deep and approximately 50 miles off the coast of Belize. It formed around 10,000 years ago, when the sea levels rose after the last ice age. A team of scientists arrived in Central America to study mud from way down in the Great Blue. They pulled out a long sample of sediment, which is basically layers of stuff that's settled over time. You might ask, so what? How are tropical storms connected with this sediment? Let's see. Tropical cyclones are big, spinning storms that form over warm ocean water. They pull up heat from the sea and blast it into the sky. And yeah, they can be devastatingly destructive, with super strong winds, heavy rain, and floods from big waves. And mud cores like the one the researchers pulled up are actually records of tropical storms. The sample they pulled up was 98 feet long, which made it the longest ever found in that area. Here's how it works. Every year, two thin layers of sediment settle in the hole where the weather is calm. But when a big storm hits, it leaves behind a different, messier layer. So by looking at these layers, scientists could tell how many storms hit that spot over the last 5,700 years. It's like counting tree rings, you know? Anyway, what they found was rather unexpected. It turns out that tropical cyclones had been getting more and more common. The lead researcher said that over the past 6,000 years, there were usually between 4 and 16 tropical storms or hurricanes every 100 years. But just in the last 20 years alone, they found signs of 9 storms in that same little area. That's way more than usual, and it shows how much things are changing. Scientists think there are 2 main reasons why tropical storms have been happening more often. One reason has to do with something called the Intertropical Convergence Zone, or ITCZ. This is an area near the equator where winds from the north and south come together. That spot has low air pressure, lots of moisture, and tons of thunderstorms. Just above it is the part of the Atlantic Ocean where most hurricanes are born. It even has an official name, the Hurricane Main Development Region. Normally, the ITCZ moves north in the summer and south in the winter because of changes in ocean temperatures. But over the past few thousand years, it's slowly been shifting farther and farther south. That's why the area where storms usually start has also moved south. It means storms are now forming and heading toward lower parts of the Atlantic than they used to. The second reason for the recent spike in storms is rising ocean temperatures. Earth has gotten warmer, and the ocean has warmed up too. The warm oceans help make more powerful storms. Such an increase likely means that this part of the world might see a lot more big storms in the future. If things keep going the way they are, scientists think the Caribbean could get hit by as many as 45 tropical storms and hurricanes by the end of this century. That's way more than anything the world has experienced in the last 5,700 years. There are just too many changes in the world that influence the situation. They create the perfect conditions for more storms to form and get really intense really fast. But if you think storms are getting more intense only over the ocean, let me tell you about America. A bunch of really dangerous storms, including tornadoes, dust storms, and wildfires, tore through several states in the Midwest and south of the USA in March 2025. At least 42 people lost their lives, and the scale of the devastation is enormous. What's scary is that most of this destruction didn't happen in the usual Tornado Alley area. Tornado Alley is a nickname for a part of the US where tornadoes happen a lot. It stretches through places like northern Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, parts of Louisiana, Iowa, Nebraska, and even eastern Colorado. But this time, storms hit places like Mississippi, Arkansas, and Alabama. Experts had warned this might happen. At the beginning of 2025, they said that tornadoes could start showing up more often farther east than usual, and that's exactly what's happening. One of their top weather experts said people in the Mississippi and Tennessee valleys should get ready for a rough spring. There are more people living in these areas than in traditional tornado zones, and many of them live in mobile homes or buildings without basements, which puts them at more risk when big storms hit. A tornado is basically a spinning tube of super strong wind that comes down from storm clouds and touches the ground. They can be really dangerous. To figure out how strong a tornado is, scientists use something called the Enhanced Fujita Scale. It goes from EF0, which stands for the weakest tornado, to EF5. Such a tornado is crazy strong, tear your house apart strong. The main question is, why are tornadoes happening more in the east now? In the US, tornado season usually kicks off in March. That's when cold air from Canada bumps into warm, wet air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. And boom, storms start to form. But this year, things are a bit different. Here's what's going on. There's a big patch of high pressure, basically a chunk of calm, warm air hanging over the southwest. That's keeping things more stable out west, so fewer thunderstorms as well as fewer tornadoes are expected there. So, tornadoes are shifting eastward. Meanwhile, the Gulf of Mexico is super warm this year, and that's helping storms form in the southeastern US. The warm water adds a lot of energy to the atmosphere, which can lead to stronger, more frequent storms in places like Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. Up north, around the Great Lakes and Northeast, it's staying cooler this spring. That means fewer big storms up there, at least for now. Now, let's get back to those devastating March storms. On March 14 and 15, a huge storm system blasted through parts of the central and southern US. This system brought 52 confirmed tornadoes, massive dust storms, and fast-moving wildfires. It all led to almost 1,100 canceled flights. About 150 million people were affected by this natural disaster. Two really strong tornadoes classified as EF4s hit Arkansas. The damage was incredible. One of those tornadoes, which hit a town called Diaz, had winds up to 190 miles per hour. That's insanely fast. For comparison, The average speed of a Formula One car is around 130 to 160 miles per hour. It was the first time in over 25 years that Arkansas got hit by two EF4s on the same day. Experts also recorded wind gusts moving at a speed of over 80 miles per hour in the southern plains. In Texas, dust storms led to fatal car crashes. Wildfires, caused and driven by the strong winds, burned through parts of Texas and Oklahoma. Oklahoma alone had more than 130 fires. So, what's next? Experts think the U.S. could see between 1,300 and 1,450 tornadoes in 2025. That's way more than the usual 1,225. And it's not just about tornadoes. A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. That means heavier rains, more flash floods, and even more powerful storms. Basically, the formula is the following. Warmer oceans plus warmer air equals stormy weather, especially in the east and southeast. But even if you don't live in any of these areas, you can't feel completely at ease either. Experts say tornadoes and other natural disasters can happen pretty much anywhere in the U.S. The risk moves around depending on the time of year and the weather. In 2003, while following a grouper that suddenly disappeared below the waves in Chetumal Bay, Mexico, a lone fisherman discovered a mysterious hole hidden from sight. More than a decade later, his son returned with researchers to take a closer look. They started measuring. 100 feet, 160 feet, 425 feet. Still no bottom. As instruments descended into the dark, still water, the readings grew stranger. Warm, salty water where it shouldn't be. Currents rising from the darkness below. The latest readings showed over 1,372 feet and still no end in sight. Quiet, deep, and dangerous. It's Ta'am Ja, the latest and officially the deepest known blue hole on Earth, and it might be hiding something never seen before. Nature takes its time. Over thousands, sometimes millions of years, water slowly carves through underground rock. Then one day, the ceiling gives way, the ground collapses, and you're left with a massive hole. That's a sinkhole. Blue holes are just ancient sinkholes that filled with water as sea levels rose long ago. From above, they look like dark circular shadows, much darker than the water around them. All because they're super deep and sunlight can hardly reach the bottom. Some go hundreds of feet down and are almost perfectly vertical. Cut off from ocean currents, they create still, isolated environments that scientists are still trying to figure out. So, what makes Ta'am Ja unusual? Well, most famous blue holes, like the Great Blue Hole in Belize, are impossible to miss. You can spot them from a satellite. Ta'am Ja, on the other hand, is practically invisible. Like nature did its best to conceal it on purpose. Even with a drone flying right above it, it's barely noticeable. That's one reason it stayed hidden for so long. However, the true mystery became apparent after the researchers had done their initial scanning. In December 2023, scientists decided to explore the depths of Ta'am Ja by lowering something called a CTD profiler, which measures conductivity, temperature, and depth. As it went past 1,312 feet, they discovered something curious. Instead of cooling down, the water suddenly got warmer. It also became noticeably saltier, with readings that matched the open Caribbean Sea. But wait, Chetumal Bay is already part of the Caribbean, so what's the big deal? Well, Ta'am Ja is tucked far into the bay, and its depth is unusual for such a calm, protected environment. What surprises scientists is that water deep inside the sinkhole has the same temperature and salinity as the open ocean, even though it's cut off from it horizontally. What this means is that there could be subterranean tunnels or fractures connecting the deep hole to open seawater, not through the surface, but beneath the rock. Kind of like a secret pipe network, possibly dating back to the time of asteroid impacts. Ta'am Ja is located near the Chicxulub crater. It's where 66 million years ago, a giant meteor slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. It's widely believed to have caused a mass extinction event that wiped out dinosaurs. The asteroid didn't create Tom Jaw, but it may have fractured the foundation, potentially making it easier for caves, tunnels, and eventually blue holes to form. Some speculate that these underwater connections could extend to other blue holes and hidden springs nearby. However, exploring Tom Jaw is not just about maps and underwater tunnels. During the first expedition, researchers saw something strange. The water above Tom Jaw was calm, while the rest of the bay had chaotic waves. Then, from the center of the hole, water started to rise upward, like a hidden spring gently exhaling. Not a geyser, not a splash, just a slow, steady surge, like something beneath had moved and pushed the water up. The fact that this happened only once made the following exploration intimidating for divers. They said that diving felt like encountering a living entity that moved and interacted with them in an intriguing and mystifying way. When you've got a place that deep, that dark, and completely cut off from the rest of the ocean, it's a door to the unknown. While it's probably too tight for the Lovecraftian sea gods to fit in there, it's not impossible that there could be species that no one's ever seen before, maybe even dangerous. It's speculative, but if the hole goes even deeper, any microbial life down there would likely be ancient and adapted to survive in extreme, hostile conditions. It doesn't have to be some scary sea creature. Even tiny, unfamiliar organisms could disrupt modern ecosystems if disturbed or released. There might be water from prehistoric times or something left behind from the asteroid impact that wiped out dinosaurs. This place might be hiding an entire ecosystem that's been sealed off for literally ages. And that matters because if life can survive in such a strange sealed-off place, it might survive in similar environments on moons like Europa or Enceladus. Also, some blue holes, like the Great Blue Hole, contain nasty stuff like clouds of toxic gas that can eat through equipment and even burn your skin. No wonder that divers felt like they were exploring something alive. Now, if you're wondering whether you can rent diving gear and actually go and explore this hole, the answer is no. Basic scuba gear requires certifications. Even dive shops won't rent to uncertified individuals, especially not for places like this. But even if certified, recreational divers can only reach a depth of about 130 feet. Going deeper takes special training, equipment, and a lot of caution. Even professionals rarely go beyond 1,000 feet, and when they do, it's with complicated, risky setups. At these depths, water pressure becomes a major obstacle, enough to crush most equipment not built specifically for it. So for now, Tom Jaw remains a mystery that's impossible to uncover while diving. The next stop is most likely sending an ROV, a remotely operated submarine equipped with cameras, arms, and sensors. It can go much deeper than any diver and stay down there longer. ROVs could help uncover layers of fossils, strange chemical zones, and even clues about past climate change. In most of the blue holes, it's possible to find life, sponges, corals, or fish. But the deeper you go, the more oxygen levels drop, which makes it hard for organisms to survive, even though some microbes live there. Among the few creatures found, there are shelled single-celled organisms called foraminifera and tiny worm-like nematodes. It's precisely because of these microscopic animals that we speculate that if life can make it in Tom Jaw's dark, salty, oxygen-free waters, maybe the same is true for other watery worlds. However, despite the enthusiasm around it, Tom Jaw is almost unnervingly empty and devoid of larger life. Even near the upper layers where oxygen levels are decent, no fish, no crustaceans, not even a tiny shrimp have been observed. Just tiny organisms invisible to the unaided eye. No bikini bottom, but to be fair, we haven't reached the bottom yet. Which brings us to the speculation. Is it possible that ROVs will never reach the ocean floor? The hole might be deeper than we expect or shaped in a way that makes it hard for our equipment to get accurate readings. It might have side tunnels, ledges, or twists that throw things off. It could also be that the walls are too unstable, or the pressure and water chemistry mess with the sensors. In a way, it's like playing an underwater level in slow motion with a robot that can grab things and get damaged. Thankfully, scientists have other options. They can use underwater drones that work on their own, drop cameras that record as they sink, or map the hole from above using sonar. There's more than one way to check its depths. Even with all our technology, there are still places on Earth we haven't explored. We've actually mapped more of Mars than the ocean floor. Spacecraft can scan the entire planet while seafloor mapping is slow, costly, and limited by darkness and pressure. Still, Tom Jha holds the record for the world's deepest blue hole, for now.
That tiny dot in the sky is an asteroid called 2024 YR4, and it gave scientists a serious scare. Early projections showed a 2.3% chance that it could hit Earth. That might sound small, but for an object big enough to wipe out a city, it was enough to raise alarms. Now, there's good news and bad news. The good, it's no longer on a collision course with our planet. The bad, it might be heading for the moon instead. Astronomers first spotted it in the El Sos Observatory in Chile back in December 2024. Judging by how bright it appeared, they estimated its size to be somewhere between 130 and 300 feet wide. That's about the size of a football field. If something this big hit Earth, it could be truly catastrophic. I mean, not on the level of the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, but still enough to destroy an entire city, depending on where it lands. Drop it over Paris, London, or New York, and you're looking at complete devastation across the city and nearby areas. That's why it was considered one of the most dangerous space rocks to ever come near us. It makes total sense that this asteroid became a bit of a celebrity. From the moment it was discovered up until February 2025, the risk of a collision just kept climbing. But now we can breathe a little easier. New calculations from NASA have completely ruled out any chance of impact. In fact, there's no serious threat from this asteroid for at least the next 100 years. Okay, but how did we go from this is a threat to, oops, we were wrong? That happens quite often, actually. I mean, an asteroid seems risky at first, then it gets even riskier, and then, out of nowhere, it's suddenly safe. Does that mean we can't trust their math? You see, the first time specialists spot an asteroid, it's really just a tiny dot of light in the sky. At that point, they have no idea what it is or where it's headed. Then they have to observe it again and do some math. That will help them figure out the path they're moving on. But even then, it's still a bit uncertain. They don't really know where the asteroid is going, so the risk corridor is this huge area where it could fly through. If any part of that corridor crosses Earth, the asteroid is considered a threat. Usually, at least 3 observations are needed to figure out its orbit. Basically, how fast it's moving and where it's headed. A lot of times, as they start to get a clearer picture, the risk zone still overlaps with Earth, so it looks more dangerous at first. But typically, as they keep tracking it, the risk zone gets smaller and moves away from Earth, and suddenly, the risk drops. And they keep narrowing down the uncertainties until they can confidently say, "Relax, y'all, it's not heading for Earth." And that's exactly what happened to just our famous 2024 YR4. So, we can all relax a bit now, right? Yeah, we know that 2024 YR4 won't hit us, but it could end up crashing into the moon instead. At first, projections said there was a 1.7% chance of that happening in 2032, but recently, that number has gone up a little to 3.8%. If it does hit the moon, though, it won't be dangerous for us. I mean, there won't be any shockwaves felt here on Earth, and the moon isn't gonna crack in half. Experts say nothing really shocking or concerning would happen, but it would be an awesome opportunity to see a lunar impact. If we're lucky, we might even catch the exact moment it happens. And if we miss it, we will still get to observe a brand new crater on our natural satellite. Such events are pretty common for the Moon since it doesn't have an atmosphere to protect it from incoming debris. In fact, there are hundreds of detectable impacts each year. See those bright spots lighting up? These are real images of asteroids hitting the Moon. But specialists aren't just sitting around and waiting. They've been keeping an eye on lunar impacts for years. For example, the European Space Agency has a project called Neliota, where they use a powerful telescope in Greece to track these impacts. They've recorded over 100 tiny explosions from space rocks hitting the Moon. They also have the Lumio mission, which is a small satellite that counts lunar impact flashes on the far side of the Moon, the side we can't see from Earth. These observations help scientists understand how often the Moon gets hit and how this might affect astronauts and lunar bases. Now, 2024 YR4 might be a special case. That's because most space objects that collide with the Moon are really small. We've never seen a collision with something larger than about 160 feet. If YR4 does hit, it could be an amazing sight. So yeah, scientists are kinda hoping it happens. But 2024 YR4 isn't the only asteroid on the radar. There are actually quite a few others that have been classified as potentially hazardous. In simple terms, that means this one might cause us some trouble. You see, there are millions of big space rocks out there in the solar system, mostly chilling in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. But only a few ever get close to Earth, and even fewer actually pose any real risk. NASA calls asteroids that orbit within 30 million miles of Earth near-Earth objects. And within that group, there's a smaller bunch of really big ones that orbit super close to us. If one of those were to hit us, it could be a big deal. There are about 2,500 of those asteroids at least that we know of. But here's the good news. Specialists don't expect any of them to hit Earth anytime soon. A few might come pretty close though, or already have, like the 2014 TN17, an asteroid that's about 540 feet wide. It got pretty close to us in March 2025, zipping by just 3.2 million miles from Earth. That's roughly 13 times further than the Moon. So yeah, not exactly close, right? But when you think about the vastness of the universe, it's actually kind of near. In fact, that was the closest this asteroid has come to Earth in nearly 300 years. Thankfully, nothing happened, and that asteroid has already drifted away from Earth again. But it's not like you need to lose sleep over asteroids that could hit our planet. Little asteroids enter Earth's atmosphere every single day. It's the big ones we worry about, like the ones you see in Hollywood movies, like Armageddon. But asteroids like that are being constantly monitored. All the objects we know of today have 0 or 1 chance of impacting Earth. And if things change, there are a few strategies that could be used to save humanity from an impact. Take the DART mission, for example, which happened in 2022. This was NASA's first test of planetary defense. They successfully managed to deflect an asteroid off its course using a spacecraft. In this case, the asteroid didn't pose any threat to Earth, but it was the perfect test subject. There are also more experimental ideas out there. For example, lasers could vaporize part of an asteroid to create a thrust effect, pushing it off course. Another idea is the gravity tractor, a big spacecraft that slowly tugs the asteroid away using its own gravitational pull. But all of these are still just ideas for now. If we can't pull any of those off, authorities would probably still have enough time to evacuate the impact zones. So yeah, I wouldn't stress too much about an asteroid impact.